Chapter 731. Seeing this, the humble prince, old man Xiao, and all the other officials felt relieved. The unexpected disaster had ended in an inexplicable way, as if they were in a dream. The humble prince cupped his hands toward the sky and said politely, "May I know your name, senior? Today, you saved the Thunderflame dynasty from disaster. We will definitely repay your kindness." There were only 7 people in the mystic comprehending realm in the world. However, there was one more out of nowhere. The humble prince wanted to know who this person was. If the humble prince guessed correctly, this person might have killed Li Juecheng and Crown Prince Lei Haoge. There was no comparison between saving the Thunderflame dynasty and killing the 2 people. However, the humble prince was curious as to why a mystic comprehending realm cultivator would kill Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge. The voice came from the sky, "Everything is caused by karma. I'm just following the path of karma." In the end, the voice gradually disappeared as if it had gone far away. "Karma, it's karma again. Old man Xiao, what's the karma he's talking about?" The humble prince was confused. Old man Xiao looked at the sky as if he wanted to see through the world. He said faintly, "I'm not sure about the path of karma. It involves the origin of heaven and earth. What this person is looking for is much more profound than what I'm looking for. If I'm not mistaken, Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge were killed by this person. Those 2 people might be affected by some karma." Even old man Xiao could not explain it clearly. The humble prince was even more confused. Fortunately, the result was good. The situation just now was truly a matter of life and death, and the Thunderfire royal dynasty would have been consigned to eternal damnation. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi had stepped out and delayed for a few breaths of time. Afterward, that mysterious expert had appeared and intimidated the other experts. Only then was the Thunderfire heaven punishing formation ready, and they had finally forced 6 direction spirit supremacy to retreat. At the thought of this, the humble prince turned to look at Ling Shiqi. He did not hide the admiration and satisfaction in his eyes. Ling Shiqi, who was in the unity of heaven and man realm, dared to face so many heavenly origin realm masters and 6 direction spiritual sovereign, who was in the mystic comprehending realm. Not only did he show his fearless courage, but he also showed his absolute loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty. If he didn't nurture such a talent and put him in an important position, he would be blind. The undemocratic king raised his voice and said, "Continue to activate the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation to prevent Lord 6 directions from attacking us. The rest of you, return to the main hall for a discussion." Buzz! A gigantic formation with a radius of 100 miles appeared. Instantly, red and purple colors filled the sky, enveloping the entire inner city of the imperial capital. This was the supreme formation that the Thunderflame dynasty was proud of, the Thunderflame heaven annihilating formation. If the array was fully activated, it would be able to summon lightning and fire. Even a sky origin stage cultivator would not be able to withstand it for long. Seeing that the Thunderfire heaven punishing array was finally activated, the people in the hall who were still in shock finally calmed down. Especially those civil officials who had no cultivation base. They almost suffocated under the spiritual pressure of so many sky origin stage cultivators. If not for Empyrean Black Flame protecting them, these people would probably have long perished. The undemocratic king knew how dangerous the process was. He first comforted the people and said, "Those top sects actually joined hands to attack the imperial palace. No one expected that. Fortunately, the crisis is over. You can rest assured now. Moreover, the imperial capital has the protection of so many powerful cultivators from the imperial hall of worship and loyal officials like Lu Xingji." Just like what the mysterious ethereal stage cultivator said, the Thunderflame dynasty is very lucky. Speaking of this, he looked at Ling Shiqi and said, "Lu Xingji, when Lord 6 directions forced me to hand over the Dark Thunder Guards and the higher-ups of the Discipline Commission, I did hesitate. However, your appearance made me determined to fight to the death with them. Even if I die, I will protect everyone's lives." Looking at the undemocratic king's excited expression, Ling Shiqi immediately said with a strong sense of righteousness, "I will pledge my loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty. I will pledge my loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty. The other civil and military officials were all very excited. After going through such a great disaster, it was rare for them to be united. Lu Xingji, the late emperor, made an exception and chose you as the chief steward of the Dark Thunder Guards. You've made a great contribution this time. I won't mistreat you. The undemocratic king was full of praise for Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi, on the other hand, was secretly laughing. In fact, he did not do anything. All he did was to say a few nice words. He did not make any great contribution. However, what he did showed the undemocratic king his loyalty. That was why the undemocratic king decided to put him in an important position. Of course, if it was someone else who rushed up like this, they might have been killed by Lord Six Directions with a slap. Leng Shiqi dared to rush up because he had his own trump card. His trump card was the mysterious ethereal stage cultivator. Leng Shiqi was not good at foresight. It was impossible for him to know that an ethereal stage cultivator was nearby and would help him. In fact, the so-called ethereal stage cultivator was actually Leng Shiqi himself. To be more precise, it was his soul double. Not long ago, when the Ink Frost Ghoul and Leng Shiqi were communicating through telepathy, he guessed that the Ink Frost Ghoul would secretly save him after he stepped up. That was how he would be treated now. However, Leng Shiqi would not hand his life over to the Ink Frost Ghoul. What if the Ink Frost Ghoul failed to save him? Therefore, an extremely crazy idea flashed through his mind. He immediately exchanged for a magical item from the system store. It was the soul double. The soul double was actually a duplicate of Leng Shiqi's soul. It was equivalent to having two souls, each of which was himself. The mysterious ethereal stage cultivator was actually Leng Shiqi in disguise. He had formed a godly soul when he broke through to the unity of heaven and man realm. Even without a physical body, he could survive in the outside world for a long time. He secretly released his soul double and used the law of earth to cover his aura. Then, he used the law of gravity to intimidate the elites. That was how he was mistaken for an ethereal stage cultivator. The moment Leng Shiqi's soul double appeared, forcing the ethereal stage cultivators to fall to the ground was already the limit of what he could do. It seemed like a great deterrent, but in fact, it did not cause any harm to the elites. It was just that the ethereal stage cultivators subconsciously thought that it was an ethereal stage cultivator who attacked, so they were mentally defeated. Leng Shiqi's actions were naturally risky. If Six Directions Spirit Sovereign attacked him directly, he would be exposed. Therefore, he did not attack again after that. He even used the word karma to show that he was unfathomable so that others would not dare to test him. As long as he could delay until the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation was activated, he would succeed. Fortunately, everything was going according to his plan, and the result was the best. Now, not only was Leng Shiqi placed in an important position, but he was also blamed for killing Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge. Therefore, he no longer had any worries. To be able to toy with two ethereal stage cultivators and dozens of ethereal stage cultivators in the palm of his hand, Leng Shiqi was bold and crazy enough to do it. Of course, all of this was based on the premise that he had comprehended the law of nature in advance. Otherwise, even if he had the system, it would be useless no matter how bold he was. The humble prince pondered for a moment, then said, Lu Xingji, you have not been one of the 4 chiefs for long, so you must not be in charge of many provinces. From now on, the 9 eastern counties of the Thunderfire dynasty are under your supervision, and I grant you the power of acting Grand Commander. Chapter 732. The Emperor gave Leng Shiqi 2 rewards. The first was the right to supervise the 9 counties in the east of the Thunderblaze dynasty. In fact, this was the right that Leng Shiqi should have, but it was divided by the other 3 Grand Managers. The others didn't think much of it, but Grand Manager Hai and Grand Manager Shinta didn't have it easy. Before coming to the palace, they had each given Leng Shiqi a county. It was like cutting a piece of meat. Now, they were going to spit out what they had swallowed earlier. As for the second reward, everyone was shocked. What did it mean to be the acting chief commander? Apparently, Lord Botched Governance was going to let Leng Shiqi be the chief commander of the Dark Thunder Guards. When Leng Shiqi's strength and experience were enough, Heavenly Venerable He Yen would probably give up his position. However, judging from Leng Shiqi's performance today, he did have the potential to become the Grand Commander, so no one said anything. "Thank you, Your Highness," Leng Shiqi said politely. "You deserve it." The Emperor smiled, but his muscles were stiff when he smiled. He probably hadn't smiled for a long time. He continued, "Although we survived a crisis today, we also found many loopholes in the imperial capital's defense. We also know that the sects in the world are so powerful." The Emperor's tone became more and more serious. This time, the sects gathered more than 30 Sky Origin Realm cultivators, but they didn't send all of their experts. For example, the mysterious 10,000 Laws sect had 9 Sky Origin Realm cultivators, the Blood-Robed Pavilion had 5, and the 6 Unity Spiritual Region had even more. If all the Sky Origin Realm cultivators from these top sects came, even the Thunderblaze Heaven-Slaying Array would be useless. Old Man Xiao also said, "There are so many top sects in the various counties of the dynasty. How did they team up within a year? Don't forget that there are great grudges between some of these sections. It's unbelievable for them to team up." "Old Man Xiao, you're saying that there's something behind their teamwork?" The Emperor was enlightened. "That's right. So, the Thunderflame dynasty has to be vigilant." Emperor Zhuozhen's eyes flashed, and he immediately ordered, "Call back all the Sky Origin stage powerhouses outside. From now on, the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation must be maintained by 4 Sky Origin stage powerhouses at all times. We can't let anyone sneak into the royal capital. Also, the restrictions on the Heavenly Thunderfire bead need to be changed as well. Otherwise, the Heavenly Thunderfire Annihilation formation will take too long to activate. This formation hasn't been used for over 1,000 years, so it can't be activated like today." Everyone deeply agreed with this point. If the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Array could be directly activated today, how could there be so many problems? Lastly, there is one more if, and that is to establish the Crown Prince. This matter could not wait any longer. There were many ordinary people in the huge Thunderblaze dynasty, and they were also the foundation of the dynasty. If no one ascends the throne, I'm afraid that the people's hearts won't be stable. Speaking of this, the humble prince glanced at the crowd. However, the problem was back to the original one. No one was suitable for the throne. Even if he wanted a puppet emperor, he had to at least look like one. At this moment, Leng Shiqi stepped forward and said, "Your Highness, I have a candidate in mind." "Let's hear it." Emperor Zhuozhen smiled when he saw someone speak, and it was Leng Shiqi. "I think there is a prince who can succeed the throne. This person is the eldest son of the late emperor, and he has countless outstanding military achievements. He is also in the unity of heaven and man realm. He is the eldest prince, Lei Haoyan." Leng Shiqi spoke out the candidate in his mind. When Lei Haoyan was mentioned, Emperor Zhuozhen frowned. A year ago, when Lei Qingjun passed away, Lei Haoyan had rashly broken into the palace. At that time, Emperor Zhuozhen personally removed Lei Haoyan's status as a prince and imprisoned him for life. However, now that Leng Shiqi recommended Lei Haoyan to succeed the throne, Emperor Zhuozhen was not happy about it. However, he still asked patiently, "Since Lord Lu recommended Lei Haoyan, you must have your own reasons." "Your Highness, I know that Lei Haoyan is a bit impulsive, but he has something that all the other princes don't have. It is something that an emperor needs," Leng Shiqi explained. "Oh? What is it?" Emperor Zhuozhen was not the only one who was curious. "It is foresight." Leng Shiqi said seriously, "Your Highness and everyone else should still remember what Lei Haoyan said when he broke into the palace a year ago." Now that he mentioned it, everyone finally remembered that Lei Haoyan said that the Thunderflame dynasty was too aggressive towards the spirit cultivator sections. What the late emperor did before his death not only did not scare off the spirit cultivator sects, but it also aroused their hatred and anger, and even threatened the rise and fall of the Thunderflame dynasty. At that time, everyone present felt that Lei Haoyan was worrying for nothing, and they also felt that he was too young. However, wasn't everything that had happened today exactly as Lei Haoyan had predicted? It was just that Lei Haoyan did not expect the spirit cultivator sex to counterattack so quickly. It seemed that Lei Haoyan's unique foresight was indeed amazing. Just from this point alone, he did have the potential to be an emperor. But then again, Lei Haoyan was originally the candidate that everyone liked. Unfortunately, with the late emperor's will, who could make an exception and make Lei Haoyan the crown prince? Therefore, Emperor Zhuozhen fell into silence. He also knew that Leng Shiqi was right. Lei Haoyan's foresight could be said to be further than everyone else. However, rules were rules, and they could not be easily broken. Leng Shiqi continued, Your Highness, I know that the late emperor stripped Lei Haoyan of his right to succeed the throne when he was still on the throne. However, if Lei Haoyan was already the emperor of the Thunderflame dynasty, he would definitely have taken precautions against the revenge and attacks of the spirit cultivator sections. Even if what happened today happened again, he would not have let us be in such a sorry state and let a Tongxian realm expert change our fate. I think that such an emperor is enough to break some of the so-called rules. Your Highness should know best which is more important. After a while, Emperor Zhuozhen nodded deeply and said, You are right. Lei Haoyan's foresight alone is worthy of the throne. I think that my brother's spirit in heaven will not blame me. After all, whether the Thunderflame dynasty has a good emperor or not is very important. The other officials looked at each other. They could see that Emperor Zhuozhen had made up his mind. They immediately shouted together, Your Highness is wise. It is really the fortune of the Thunderflame dynasty. Emperor Zhuozhen did not care about the flattery of everyone. He said to Leng Shiqi, This matter is settled. Lei Haoyan was recommended by you, so you will go and announce the decree on behalf of me. Your Highness, Your Highness. Leng Shiqi laughed in his heart. He had finally waited for this opportunity. A great opportunity was right in front of him. Chapter 733. The humble king asked Leng Shiqi to deliver the imperial edict, which was a great favor to Lei Haoyan. After all, Lei Haoyan was still under house arrest. Lei Haoyan would definitely remember who saved him and gave him the throne. If the future emperor remembered the favor, then it would be a big deal. Prince Ying's palace was the residence of the eldest prince, Lei Haoyan. However, Lei Haoyan was stripped of his position as Prince Ying after he came out of Sky Scar. A year ago, he was even stripped of his status as a prince. From then on, he would be alone for the rest of his life. Prince Ying's palace used to be luxurious and majestic, but now it looked lonely and withered. Even the ground in front of the gate was covered with fallen leaves. It was obvious that no one had cleaned it for a long time. Now, there were only a few old servants left to take care of Lei Haoyan. Naturally, they could not take care of such a huge residence. At this moment, Lei Haoyan was sitting on the ground. His originally masculine and mighty figure was now dejected. His beard and hair were messy, and his eyes were cloudy. Empty wine jugs were scattered around him, and his body exuded a strong smell of alcohol. There was a stooped old eunuch standing next to Lei Haoyan. He looked worried, but he did not try to persuade him, because persuasion was useless. Drinking to drown his sorrows might not be a bad choice. Lei Haoyan was an expert at the unity of heaven and man level anyway. This little bit of alcohol would not hurt him. What made Lei Haoyan so dejected was his sadness. Not long ago, when the imperial capital was in turmoil, some color appeared in Lei Haoyan's eyes. However, he just sneered and continued to drink his wine. Cha-cha, Leng Shiqi walked on the path of Prince Ying's palace. He stepped on a thick layer of fallen leaves and came before Lei Haoyan. You are Lu Xingji. The old eunuch exclaimed. He knew that Leng Shiqi was now one of the 4 chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guards, but what was he doing here at this time? The old eunuch suddenly thought of a possibility. He immediately shouted, Don't even think about harming His Highness. His Highness has such a loyal servant by his side. Leng Shiqi lightly said. The old eunuch was only at the spirit transformation realm. Leng Shiqi could kill him with a single glance. Lei Haoyan glanced at Leng Shiqi, then took a big gulp of liquor and coughed several times. It seems that my time is up. In his opinion, the Dark Thunder Guards had always dealt with some shameful matters. Lei Haoge was about to ascend the throne, and as the first prince, he definitely couldn't stay. The news of Lei Haoge's death was only known to the upper echelons of the Thunderfire dynasty. It had only been a day since Lei Haoge's death, so Lei Haoyan didn't know and thought that Leng Shiqi was here to kill him. Leng Shiqi shook his head. Does your highness not want to live anymore? Suddenly, the surrounding aura was completely isolated. Lei Haoyan's eyes flashed, but he didn't care too much. He thought that Leng Shiqi really had something to say to him. Then, another Leng Shiqi suddenly appeared beside Leng Shiqi. However, that Leng Shiqi was only the size of a 7 or 8-year-old child. That was Leng Shiqi's soul avatar. Lei Haoyan asked doubtfully, Lu Xingji, if you have something to say, just say it. I will remember your favor. Of course, a favor is not enough for me to give your highness the crown prince such a big gift. Leng Shiqi said with a smile, but there was a hint of sinister in his smile. Lei Haoyan was not too surprised. He did not have much contact with Leng Shiqi, but he had heard that he was a greedy person. What do you want? I want you. As soon as Leng Shiqi finished speaking, 6 mysterious vortexes appeared behind him. Each vortex flickered with a multicolored light. In an instant, Lei Haoyan's eyes lost their luster, and his consciousness had already been dragged into the glass samsara realm. He would go through 6 rounds of reincarnation in a row. Every time he went through a round of reincarnation, a part of his consciousness would be wiped out. This was an illusion created by Leng Shiqi when he visualized the 6 paths of reincarnation in the underworld. It was the glazed reincarnation mirror, a rank 7 spiritual skill, dream glazed glass, and his comprehension of the Thousand Revolutions fantasy world. Not to mention that Lei Haoyan's state of mind was fluctuating greatly and had long been unstable. Even if he was in a normal state, he would not be able to last more than a few rounds. His consciousness would eventually disappear completely, leaving only a shell. Perhaps only a spirit caster who had condensed a primordial spirit could survive 6 rounds of reincarnation. But even so, after experiencing 6 rounds of reincarnation, would you still remember who you were? These 6 rounds of reincarnation might take decades or centuries for a reincarnator, but in reality, it was only a matter of a few breaths of time. So even if he made it through, he would be muddle-headed and at the mercy of others. This was the terrifying part of the glass samsara realm. And the reason why Leng Shiqi wanted to wipe out Lei Haoyan's consciousness was because of his body. It could also be said that he had taken a fancy to his identity. The Crown Prince's identity. Chapter 734. Leng Shiqi's soul doppelganger was not only used to scare people, but it also had a more important use, which was to possess someone. When he attacked the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, he saw the Thousand Illusions Sword Elder possess Wei Qian's body, which was a reminder to him. After obtaining the soul doppelganger and scaring off 6 Directions Spiritual Elder and the others, he had his own plans. He wanted to use the soul doppelganger to possess a prince. From there, he could indirectly sit on the throne of the Thunderstorm dynasty. However, this goal was not so easy to achieve. First of all, he could not be disturbed during the possession process, let alone be discovered. Especially since Leng Shiqi had never possessed anyone before, it might take a long time. Therefore, the prince that he wanted to possess could not have any experts protecting him. Among the many princes, Lei Haoyan was the most pitiful. He was stripped of his status as a prince and there were only a few old servants in Prince Ying's residence. Lei Haoyan naturally became Leng Shiqi's best target. Other than that, he also had his eyes on Lei Haoyan's powerful cultivation, physical body, and purple crystal frost flame. If he possessed Lei Haoran or Lei Haoyan, he might succeed and sit on the throne. However, Leng Shiqi, who was used to controlling power, naturally hoped that his soul doppelganger would not be too weak. There was another difficulty in possession. When he killed Lei Haoge, he found that Lei Haoge, as the crown prince, already had a treasure to protect him. If not for Leng Shiqi's comprehension of the law of gravity, he might not have been able to kill Lei Haoge. Therefore, Ling Shiqi had to possess a prince before he became the crown prince. In this way, Lei Haoyan was the most suitable candidate. A year ago, Lei Haoyan had predicted that the spirit cultivator sect would take revenge, which could be considered as helping Ling Shiqi. At this moment, Lei Haoyan's consciousness had been hooked into the glass reincarnation realm by Ling Shiqi. In his first life, he was born as a little beggar, suffering all kinds of humiliation and suffering. His most common sentence was, "I'm the crown prince, I'm the emperor." However, what he received was endless mockery and bullying. When he was in his teens, he starved to death on the streets. Before he died, he still said, "I am the crown prince, I am the emperor." The second life was even worse. Lei Haoyan was reincarnated as a stray dog. He froze to death by the roadside after living for less than 2 years. His eyes were filled with confusion. In his third life, he was finally born into a normal family. At first, he could still vaguely remember who he was. But as time passed, he slowly grew up, got married, had children, raised children, and finally died of old age. It was a peaceful and happy life. When he breathed his last, he had completely forgotten that he was once the first prince of the Thunderflame dynasty. He had also forgotten that he was about to become the crown prince and even the emperor. Lei Haoyan closed his eyes and lost consciousness. He lost consciousness forever. In the outside world, only 3 breaths of time had passed. Ling Shiqi gently waved his hand and retracted the glass samsara mirror. To be able to last for 3 lifetimes is not bad. Then, he looked at Lei Haoyan's body. This was a body without a soul and consciousness. With a thought, Ling Shiqi's soul avatar immediately entered Lei Haoyan's body. It immediately broke into his spiritual space and smoothly took over his body. The process was smoother than he imagined. When Lei Haoyan opened his eyes again, he saw a familiar man in a black and red official's uniform. It was Ling Shiqi. Lei Haoyan and Ling Shiqi looked at each other and smiled. This feeling is a bit strange. Ling Shiqi and the soul avatar were both his own consciousness. Just like how his left and right hands were not divided into primary and secondary, they would not affect each other. Now that the soul avatar had its own body, if Ling Shiqi's main body died, he could use the soul avatar's consciousness to continue living. It could be considered an extra life. Ling Shiqi said, "Everything is done. Next, we just have to wait for the coronation. I will go and collect information on Lei Haoyan's daily habits to avoid exposing any flaws." "That's good. You and I are connected. As long as I see the information, I will know. And even if I have some unusual behavior, it's not a big problem. After all, Lei Haoyan has gone through a few ups and downs. It's normal for him to have some changes. Alright, since we are connected, there's no need to say anything more. It's a bit weird to talk to yourself." Ling Shiqi did not say this out loud, but in his heart. Lei Haoyan, who was standing opposite him, shrugged. "Isn't it because you wanted to try?" After that, Ling Shiqi turned around and returned to the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards. The old eunuch immediately took his soul doppelganger to bathe and change his clothes. Not long after, Prince Ying's palace welcomed over 1,000 guards and servants. In just a day's time, Prince Ying's palace was cleaned up. At the same time, the news that Lei Haoyan was conferred the title of Crown Prince was released. It was also announced that he would ascend the throne next month. The imperial capital immediately became lively again. The Crown Prince was clearly Lei Haoga, and he was about to ascend the throne. Why was there a sudden change? However, the Thunderfire dynasty did not disclose the details of Lei Haoga's assassination to the public, so everyone could only guess blindly. However, this did not stop the officials and nobles from flocking to Prince Ying's palace to congratulate Lei Haoyan. The Prince Ying's palace, which was still desolate yesterday, suddenly became the most lively place in the imperial capital. It was a kind of irony. Unfortunately, none of them could see Lei Haoyan, because he announced to the public that he was not feeling well and needed to rest for a few days. He would not see anyone. Others thought about it and agreed. Lei Haoyan was originally a useless prince. Once the new emperor ascended the throne, he might be eliminated. From such a precarious situation, he suddenly became the crown prince, and was even preparing to ascend the throne. It was not easy for anyone to recover, so it was normal for him to adjust his mentality. In fact, this was just the soul avatar adapting to this body. Not only did he need to learn Lei Haoyan's habits, speech, and movements, he also needed to adapt to Lei Haoyan's own strength. Lei Haoyan had the cultivation of one with the world, and he had also refined the purple crystal frost flame. He needed time to regain control of these things. The soul avatar also went into seclusion for a few days. There was a pleasant surprise. Lei Haoyan's cultivation technique was extraordinary. He cultivated the Thunderfire dynasty's Yang technique, which only the direct descendants of the Thunderfire dynasty's royal family had the qualifications to come into contact with. This technique was comprehended by the Thunderfire dynasty's ancestors from the Thunderfire Heavenly Pearl, and it was abnormally fierce. Especially if one could refine the fire or lightning variants, its power would be multiplied. In terms of rank, it could be called a 9th-tier cultivation technique. Lei Haoyan had already cultivated the Thunderfire Yang technique to the 7th layer, and he was only one step away from the 8th layer, which was the Heaven Origin realm. This technique had developed lightning and fire to the extreme. It just so happened that Leng Shiqi lacked a powerful fire attribute cultivation technique, and his use of the Crimson Gold Earth Dragon Flame was still superficial, which could make up for it. No one would have thought that the Thunderfire dynasty's crown prince, the future emperor, was actually Leng Shiqi. Chapter 735. When Leng Shiqi returned to the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards, everyone looked at him differently. Today, Leng Shiqi could be regarded as the favorite of the king of poor governance. He not only had the right to supervise the 9 provinces, but also had the right to be the acting commander. In the past, when the commander was absent, the 4 directors took turns to take charge of the affairs. But now it was different. As long as the commander was absent, Leng Shiqi would be in charge of the Dark Thunder Guards. It was known that the commander, Lord Black Flame, was not in the imperial capital most of the time. This meant that Leng Shiqi had unknowingly become half a commander. Leng Shiqi had reached such a high position in the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards not long after he came. How could the Dark Thunder Guards not be shocked? Now, in the Dark Thunder Guards, anyone who saw Leng Shiqi still felt a little incredible. Some seniors still found it hard to accept, thinking that Leng Shiqi was not worthy of his position. There were also some young people whose eyes were full of worship and admiration. Leng Shiqi had become their goal and role model, and they couldn't wait to join him immediately. On this day, there were more than 60 people sitting in the conference hall of Xingji Pavilion. What was terrible was that 70% of them were masters in the realm of oneness of heaven and men. There were 9 people sitting in the front. They were the 9 deputy directors who belonged to Leng Shiqi. Ren Yi was sitting in the first row. The rest were all supervisors, who were in the early stage of oneness of heaven and men and in the late stage of Gang's spirit realm. Generally speaking, those who could become supervisors in Gang's spirit realm were all young people who needed to be trained by the Dark Thunder Guards. After Leng Shiqi came in, everyone said in unison, "Greetings, General Director." He glanced at the crowd and found something very interesting. 30 to 40% of the masters present were old men with white hair and beard. It seems that this is a place for them to retire. He thought to himself, but he was still very kind on the surface. Don't be so polite. I never like any red tape. Everyone here only needs to abide by one rule, and that is absolute obedience to me. At this point, the 1000 Illusion Dao sword appeared in Leng Shiqi's hand and then disappeared. Instantly, sword threads as thin as hair intertwined and formed a sword formation above everyone's heads. This was something that Leng Shiqi imitated from the 1000 Illusion Swordmaster's battle. Later on, he cultivated the 1000 Illusion Sword Codex and had the 1000 Illusion Dao sword in his hand. He could also use the sword silk formation like the 1000 Illusion Swordmaster. Of course, in terms of power, he could not compare to the 1000 Illusionary Swordmaster. After all, the 1000 Illusionary Swordmaster possessed Wei Qi Yan and was at his peak. However, it wasn't a problem to use it to intimidate these unity of heaven realms. The sitting masters immediately felt as if their backs were pierced by the sword chi. The spiritual power contained in the sword chi made these oneness of heaven and men realm experts tremble. Some inner supervisor of Gang's spirit realm were so scared that they broke out in cold sweat. Everyone was secretly sweating in their hearts. As the saying goes, a new broom sweeps clean. Even though this was the first time Chief Steward Lu had gathered the upper echelons of the 9 provinces, it seemed that he wanted to establish his authority. This was within everyone's expectations. However, what was unexpected was the power displayed by Leng Shiqi. At that moment, someone familiar with him secretly transmitted a message. Didn't Lord Lu just break through to the oneness of heaven and men realm not long ago? Why is he so powerful? Didn't you notice that he is already in the middle stage of the oneness of heaven and men realm? He should have broken through from the Gang spirit realm to the middle stage of the oneness of heaven and men realm. It can be seen that his power is incredible. This is just his cultivation. What makes me more amazed is his power. This sword formation doesn't seem very complicated, but condensing the sword into threads can only be done by sword cultivators in the oneness of heaven and men realm. In addition, he has the 8th level earth weapon, the 1000 illusion Dao sword in his hand. Just based on this, I'm afraid that he is not weaker than the other 3 chief stewards. His progress is too amazing. He has reached this level in only about 3 years. If he is given a few more decades, what kind of realm will he reach? That's why I said that you should put away your little thoughts and follow this master well. In the future, you will be able to achieve great success with just a little bit of light. Leng Shiqi saw that everyone's expressions were different and knew that they were secretly transmitting a message. He said, I don't have any other meaning. I only have one sentence. Since you are following me, you have to do things according to the way of Xingji Pavilion. I will not care about your little calculations. As long as you do your part well, I will not treat you unfairly. Everyone understood that Leng Shiqi's hand was giving a sweet date after a slap. They said together, this subordinate obeys. Alright, let's all do our own things. There is one thing to pay attention to, and that is to keep an eye on those spirit cultivator sects at all times. Especially the top sects. Leng Shiqi finally reminded them. Those top sects had failed to attack the palace this time. They would not give up so easily, so they had to keep a close eye on them. Following that, Leng Shiqi dismissed everyone. He was preparing to take care of some matters. After all, during his closed-door cultivation, he had accumulated some information that he needed to look through personally. But right at that moment, the Ink Frost Ghost Man's voice sounded out again. Midnight, east of the imperial capital. The Ink Frost Ghost Man's voice only said a few words before disappearing. Leng Shiqi opened his supercilious eye, and all the spirit energy within 100 li of him could be seen clearly. After breaking through to the unity of heaven and man realm and condensing his soul, his supercilious eye's range of observation had reached 100 li. However, he still did not see the Ink Frost Ghost Man's chi. This meant that the Ink Frost Ghost Man was not in the imperial capital. He did not know what method he used to transmit his voice to Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi's finger lightly tapped on the handle. The Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Array had just been closed, and the Ink Frost Ghost Man dared to transmit his voice. Was he not afraid of being detected by the imperial capital's array formation? It had to be said that the Ink Frost Ghost Man's concealment technique was superb, and he was very bold. Since the Ink Frost Ghost Man had taken the risk to stay near the imperial capital, it meant that he had something important to discuss with Leng Shiqi. He guessed that the Ink Frost Ghost Man wanted him to do something for the Blood Garment Pavilion. Then, he left an illusion in his secret room and quietly left the imperial capital. Now, he was no longer the small fry that the Blood Garment Pavilion could manipulate. Even if he had to face the Vice Pavilion Master of the Blood Garment Pavilion alone, he had enough confidence. Late at night, Leng Shiqi arrived at the agreed meeting place alone. However, what he saw was not the Ink Frost Ghost Man, but a human-shaped puppet. The puppet spoke in human language, and its voice was very mechanical and stiff. Leng Shiqi, in order to not be detected by the array formation near the imperial capital, I have attached a portion of my spiritual energy to this puppet. Ling Shiqi understood that the Ink Frost Ghost Man had used such a method. With that, he was even more fearless. What instructions does the Vice Pavilion Master have for this disciple? The Ink Frost Ghost Man's words caused Ling Shiqi to listen attentively. The Ink Frost Ghost Man said, "It's time to let you know the real Blood Seed Plan." Chapter 736. The Real Blood Seed Plan. Ling Shiqi had guessed correctly. The Blood Seed Plan did not only consist of him, Delta Origi, Yushu, and Meng Ming. He had always wanted to know how many secrets were hidden in this plan and what was its ultimate goal. The puppet possessed by the Ink Frost Ghostly Man said with a piercing voice, the Blood Seed Plan had actually started 100 years ago. There were some outstanding disciples who were placed in other forces. The sects secretly helped them to climb up the ranks in an attempt to return the favor to the sections. However, it was not easy to become a core member of a force. Ordinary talents could only reach the middle level at most. However, relying on the power of the middle level could not bring about great benefits to the Blood Garment Pavilion. The Blood Seed Plan had reached a bottleneck because of this until the Pavilion Master decided to nurture a true prodigy. Therefore, there was the Blood Mist Island and the four of you. Ling Shiqi understood the origin of the Blood Seed Plan. The plan had been started a long time ago. There were probably many people from the Blood Garment Pavilion in the imperial capital now. However, he still could not guess the purpose of the Blood Seed Plan. What was the so-called breaking the shackles of the Blood Garment Pavilion? The Ink Frost Ghostly Man continued, the Blood Seed Plan has been going on for more than 100 years. We thought it would continue for another 100 years before it could succeed. However, your improvement is amazing. In just a few years, you have become one of the 4 chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guards. Now, you are valued by the Emperor and hold great power. Now, you are qualified to know the true purpose of the Blood Seed Plan. When he heard up to here, Ling Shiqi held his breath in concentration. For the sake of this objective, he'd experienced countless storms of blood on Blood Mist Island, and he'd even lost his past memories and experiences. After killing his way out of the Blood Mist Island, he had not stopped for a moment. He had been running around and almost lost his life several times. It was not easy for him to obtain the qualification to know the truth. The Blood Garment Pavilion is one of the top 7 sects in the world. It is one of the top sects and is one of the top sections. The assassins under the Blood Garment Pavilion are feared by countless spirit cultivators. It can be said that they have gained both fame and fortune. However, we are not satisfied with this. The Ink Frost Ghostly Man's tone suddenly became sharp, revealing boundless ambition. If others had heard this, they would have thought that the Blood Garment Pavilion's higher-ups had lost their minds. The Blood-Robed Pavilion was already a top-notch sect. It had several Sky Origin stage cultivators under its command. The 9 Netherworld Blood-Robed assassins were famous all over the world. Many powerful cultivators had been killed by them. This was already a height that countless people could only dream of. Even if they could reach a fraction of the Blood Garment Pavilion's level, it would be enough for them to smile in the underworld. However, the Blood Garment Pavilion was far from satisfied with this. Wasn't this just looking for trouble for himself? At first, Ling Shiqi also had this idea, but it was just a fleeting thought. The more accomplished a person was, the less satisfied they would be with their current achievements. Ling Shiqi was the same. Logically speaking, he could be considered to have great authority now. He oversaw the 9 eastern counties of the Thunderblaze dynasty and had dozens of Union of Heaven experts under him. He was already a great figure that could cause a commotion with a stomp of his feet. However, Ling Shiqi was never satisfied with the status quo. He was not willing to sit in the position of one of the 4 great chiefs for the rest of his life. Of course, he wanted to continue to climb up and become the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards or even obtain higher authority. In this respect, Ling Shiqi could understand the Blood Garment Pavilion's ambition. Seeing Ling Shiqi's approval, Ink Frost Ghost Man continued, the Blood Garment Pavilion's strength is not bad, but in fact, it is controlled by others. You haven't been in the sect for long, so you may not have felt it. The feeling of being tied down is enough to drive people crazy. In the eyes of other sects, no matter how strong the blood garment pavilion is, it is just a sword in their hands. They will use it when they need it and abandon it when they don't need it. Those people are afraid of the blood garment pavilion's assassins, but at the same time, they look down on them. After thousands of years of inheritance, the blood garment pavilion has had enough. Therefore, we resolutely decided to change this situation. The Blood Seed plan is to send talented disciples like you into the major forces. When you all succeed in rising to the top, you can secretly bring a lot of resources and benefits to the Blood Garment Pavilion. Most importantly, when the Blood Garment Pavilion rises in the future, it will inevitably be besieged by a large number of sections. At that time, it will be time for you to really show your strength. Ling Shiqi grasped the key point. Rise. What was the Blood Garment Pavilion going to do that it would be besieged by so many sects? In the original plan, we planned to announce to the world in a few decades that the Blood Garment Pavilion will no longer be hidden in the dark and will no longer be a sword in the hands of others. The Blood Garment Pavilion will still be an assassin force, but it will be up to us to decide what kind of assassination missions we accept or not. More importantly, the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion, like the disciples of other sects, can go out to gain experience and compete for opportunities. However, in the past thousands of years, the Blood Garment Pavilion has been shouldering too many grievances. Among the sects in the world, from the top sects to the third-rate forces, almost all of their disciples have been killed by the assassins of the Blood Garment Pavilion. The reason why they have not directly retaliated against us is that, first, they are afraid of our strength. Second, everyone tacitly agrees that the Blood Garment Pavilion will not bear grievances. Otherwise, if they lose this sword, it will be difficult for them to do some things. Even so, in recent years, many people have secretly come to the Blood Garment Pavilion to cause trouble. You should have experienced it. Ling Shiqi nodded. When he was still in the spirit transformation realm, he had bumped into the Tang family at the Donglin County branch. The elder of the Tang family had almost killed him. It turned out that this kind of thing was not rare. So, once the sects rise, those forces who resent us will definitely join forces to destroy the Blood Garment Pavilion. In their eyes, since the Blood Garment Pavilion is no longer willing to be the sword, they will change it. When that time comes, the strength of the sects will definitely not be enough to resist them. We will need your strength. The Ink Frost Ghost Man finally revealed the purpose of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Ling Shiqi understood. He knew that the Blood Garment Pavilion would face a disaster in the future, and this disaster was brought on by their own initiative. Of course, the Blood Garment Pavilion would not seek their own destruction, so they came up with the Blood Seed plan. When these people became the upper echelons of those forces, they would have a lot of power, which would greatly reduce the pressure that the Blood Garment Pavilion had to bear. If a top sect like the Blood Garment Pavilion could not bear it, then it would be fine to add a few more. For example, Ling Shiqi. If he was already the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards when the Blood Garment Pavilion rose, he could have prevented most of the sects in the 9 eastern counties from going against the Blood Garment Pavilion. He alone could have greatly reduced the pressure on the Blood Garment Pavilion. In addition, the Discipline Commission where Delta Origi was, the Ultimate Saber Hall where Yushu was, and the Purgatory Demons sect where Meng Ming was, as well as the people who had participated in the Blood Seed plan in the past, there would not be many sects that could go against the Blood Garment Pavilion in the end. Under such circumstances, if the Blood Garment Pavilion was still destroyed, it would be purely because of their own lack of ability, and they could not blame anyone else. However, if the Blood Garment Pavilion really passed this stage, it could be said that they had achieved their goal and could finally establish themselves in the world. Without this layer of shackles, the Blood Garment Pavilion would become more prosperous and powerful. Ling Shiqi had to admit that this was an extremely huge plan that would take hundreds of years, the efforts of several generations, and extremely strong patience to successfully complete. He also had to admire the strategy and determination of the Blood Garment Pavilion's upper echelons. Chapter 737. However, Ling Shiqi had a major doubt. Would the people who participated in the Blood Seed project still listen to the Blood Cloak Pavilion after they became the higher-ups of a force? Ling Shiqi was now one of the 4 great general managers. But he was no longer in awe of the blood-robed pavilion. Now that he had become the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards or reached the Sky Origin stage, his awe of the blood-robed pavilion had disappeared. When the Blood Cloak Pavilion asked him for help, he might not help them. He did not believe that the Blood Cloak Pavilion had not thought of this. They had planned for such a long time and such an important plan. They could not afford any accidents at the core. It meant that the Blood Cloak Pavilion must have their own backup plan. For example, they might have done something to Ling Shiqi and the others. Ling Shiqi muttered in his heart and said, "I understand. What do you need me to do?" Tonight, the Ink Frost ghostly man did not come to him just to chat. The Ink Frost ghostly man smiled and said, "There is indeed something I need you to do. In fact, the Blood Cloak Pavilion has been trying to change in recent years. We participated in Lei Qingjuan's birthday banquet, and this time, to let the other sects begin to adapt to the Blood Cloak Pavilion standing in front of others. You are already the great manager who oversees the 9 eastern counties, so we are going to let the Blood Cloak Pavilion branch in the 9 eastern counties try to change the rules of accepting missions. This will definitely cause dissatisfaction among the local sections. Maybe they will make a big deal out of it. When that happens, you will have to step in." "I see." Ling Shiqi's mind raced. It seemed that the blood-robed pavilion wanted to use the 9 eastern counties under his control as a test subject. This matter was actually not a big deal. As long as it did not cause public outrage, he could suppress it with his status. However, he still said, "This is a bit troublesome. Deputy Pavilion Master, you know that I have not been in office for long. I have just taken over the supervision of the 9 eastern counties. The deputy managers and eunuchs under me have not been completely subdued, let alone the inspectors and supervisors of the various counties. To put it bluntly, my authority is far from enough. It is better to start this after some time. Moreover, we cannot let several counties do this at the same time. Otherwise, there is nothing I can do if there is an accident." The Ink Frost ghostly being chuckled, "Don't worry, since we've already waited for so long, there's no need to rush. What I just said will be carried out over the next few years, so it won't make things difficult for you. Moreover, the sect won't let you work for free. I know that with your current status, you don't lack ordinary resources. I think this is what you need." At this moment, the puppet possessed by the Ink Frost spectre pulled out a piece of its own structure and handed it over. "This is?" Ling Shiqi asked. "It is a jade slip, but there are some restrictive spells on it. Later, I will tell you the spell to remove the restrictive spells. Inside the jade slip, there are all the experiences we had when we reached the Sky Origin stage." Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. The experience of breaking through to the Sky Origin stage. This was something that no amount of resources or treasures could exchange for. How many people in the Union of Heaven and Man realm wanted to advance further but had no one to guide them? Only top-notch sects had these things. Even in top-notch sects, not everyone could get their hands on them. In the Blood Cloak Pavilion, perhaps only the 9 Hades Blood Cloak assassins were qualified. These are only our experiences. They might not be suitable for you, but you can use them as a reference. After you memorize them, destroy the jade slip. Do not spread it out. In addition, you and the Delta Origi are both in the imperial capital. Xiongming is also in Tianshan County. They are under your supervision. It's best if you can help, the Ink Frost ghostly being advised. "Don't worry, Vice Pavilion Master. I understand." Even if the Ink Frost ghostly being did not say so, Ling Shiqi would have done it anyway. It's about time. The Blood Seed project will only begin in a few decades. There's no need for you to rush. You just need to steadily become the Dark Thunder Guard's commander. With that, the puppet in front of Ling Shiqi suddenly disintegrated and exploded into a pile of debris. Ling Shiqi gently waved his hand and crushed the debris into dust. Only then did he feel relieved and leave. In the following month, the imperial capital could be said to be filled with undercurrents. The sudden activation of the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Formation and the series of shocking changes yesterday made many people realize that something was wrong. However, the Thunderfire dynasty announced that they were improving the formation. Of course, not many people believed it. At the same time, Lei Haoyan became the crown prince and was about to ascend the throne. The various major forces of the Thunderfire dynasty were undergoing a preliminary reshuffle under the orders of the shoddy prince. For example, some of the older members of the Dark Thunder Guard had retired, leaving many positions empty. These positions were left for Lei Haoyan to appoint, so they naturally became Lei Haoyan's subordinates. The situation was similar for the patrol guards and the discipline commission. Even the officials who were qualified to take up positions and the upper echelons of the various provinces were transferred. All of this was to prepare for Lei Haoyan's ascension to the throne. There were also many people who took a fancy to the empty positions and fought for them with all their might. During this process, Leng Shiqi was the one who suffered a bit. Because he had many senior subordinates, 30% of the positions were suddenly empty. However, he didn't care. These empty positions would only be filled by stronger people in the future. After all, no one in this world was closer to the emperor than him. Lei Haoyan, or rather, the Lei Haoyan who was possessed by Leng Shiqi's soul avatar, was very busy during this period. He had already started to get in touch with the affairs of the Thunderfire dynasty. Every day, he was full of social activities. The shoddy prince was paving the way for him, but he still had to walk the path himself. It was very important to know the right people. At this time, Leng Shiqi's soul avatar sent off the last visitor of the night. The shoddy prince then sent someone to invite him into the palace. Soon, Lei Haoyan arrived at the palace. The shoddy prince said seriously, "Haoyan, you will ascend the throne the day after tomorrow. There are some things I need to tell you personally. Come with me." Then, the soul avatar followed the shoddy prince through layers of formations and came to a room full of thunderfire energy. There was nothing else in the room except for a stone table in the center. There were a few items placed on it. The soul avatar immediately saw that the thunderfire heavenly bead was one of them. He thought to himself, this must be the place where the most important trump card of the Thunderfire dynasty is kept. The shoddy prince walked to the front of the table and said, "Haoyan, you have experienced a lot in the past 2 years. These might not be trials for you, but opportunities to train your will and state of mind. I have noticed that you are much more mature than before. You are definitely qualified to sit on the dragon throne. I am very pleased. Uncle." The soul avatar was about to speak but was interrupted by the shoddy prince. "I know what you are thinking. After you ascend the throne, I will go into seclusion in the dragon vein. The Thunderfire dynasty will be under your control. However, you still need 2 royal family members to assist you for a period of time. Today, I called you here to tell you the biggest secret of the Thunderfire dynasty." Chapter 738. The soul clone's heart skipped a beat. The shoddy prince was going to tell him all the secrets and trump cards of the Thunderblaze dynasty. The shoddy prince picked up the heavenly Thunderblaze pearl first. You should be familiar with this item. However, there are still some restrictions on the heavenly Thunderblaze pearl. I have decided to remove some of them. At least, the heavenly Thunderblaze array can be activated at any time. You have to do this personally after you ascend to the throne. At that time, you will be the only one in the world who knows how to remove the restrictions on the heavenly Thunderblaze pearl. This is the first thing you have to do after you ascend to the throne. Remember to delay it. The soul clone nodded. It seemed that the shoddy prince wanted him to remove the restrictions and set up new ones. This was exactly what he wanted. Because the Leng Shiqi still had a heavenly Thunderblaze pearl. As long as he knew how to remove the restrictions, the Leng Shiqi would have another treasure. Then, the shoddy prince picked up a palm-sized disc. This is a sound transmission disc. Remember, don't use it unless the Thunderblaze dynasty is about to be destroyed. The soul clone stared at the disc. This thing was related to the survival of the Thunderblaze dynasty. Haoyan, on the surface, we only have one mystic comprehending expert, Old Master Qiao. However, that is not the case. Hearing this, the soul clone was shocked. The Thunderblaze dynasty actually had more than one mystic comprehending expert. However, he was puzzled. If that was the case, why didn't they invite the other mystic comprehending experts over a month ago? If that was the case, Six Directions' spiritual sovereign and the others would not be a threat. They would not have nearly forced the Thunderblaze dynasty into a desperate situation. Actually, the Thunderblaze dynasty has two more mystic comprehending experts hidden in the dark. The shoddy prince said proudly. However, he then sighed softly. However, these two cannot appear as they wish. Why is that? Because they are both in the heavenly tomb. The shoddy prince said in a deep voice, "You have been to the heavenly tomb before. That is where the heavenly origin realm experts of the Thunderblaze dynasty were killed. In fact, there are not only heavenly origin realm experts, there are also two mystic comprehending experts." The spiritual avatar immediately recalled that he had vaguely seen two mysterious figures at the end of the heavenly tomb. Could they be the wills left behind by the Tongxian stage experts? The humble prince continued, "The power of the metaphysical realm is beyond your imagination. Even though they are dead, their minds are still alive. However, they couldn't leave the heavenly tomb easily. Otherwise, their souls would be completely destroyed and the heavenly tomb would cease to exist. Furthermore, the two of them can't fight for long in their consciousnesses. So, we can only ask for their help when the Thunderflame dynasty is on the brink of death." It turned out that the Thunderflame dynasty still had such a terrifying trump card. As expected, they were not a colossus like the three great dynasties. Their foundation was simply too terrifying. The humble prince didn't stop. He put down the round plate and picked up a golden lock. "This is the dragon-resisting lock specially prepared for you. With it protecting you, no one can kill you except for metaphysical realm warriors. Previously, I gave one to Lei Haoga as well. Unfortunately, no one would have thought that a Tongxian realm cultivator would really try to kill him. So, I asked Old Master Qiao to stay in the palace. Try not to leave the palace unless it's an emergency." Originally, the dragon-resisting lock was enough to keep the emperor safe. However, Lei Haoga's death destroyed this guarantee. Therefore, the humble prince had to ask Old Master Qiao to protect Lei Haoyan secretly. However, Old Master Qiao was a Tongxian realm cultivator after all. He wouldn't come here to protect Lei Haoyan. Therefore, Lei Haoyan had to stay in the palace for a long time. Although Lei Haoyan wouldn't have much freedom, it was still better than being assassinated. In the end, the humble prince took out two jade slips. One of them recorded the way to activate the Thunderflame heaven-destroying formation. The other one recorded all the contents of the 9th level cultivation method, the Thunderflame Ardent Yang technique. It also recorded the experiences of generations of royal experts who practiced this cultivation method. You are very talented in cultivation and have a chance to reach the Sky Origin realm. Don't be blinded by power. You have to work harder in the future. Thank you for your reminder, Royal Uncle. The humble prince was satisfied that Lei Haoyan didn't show any arrogance even though he was about to ascend to the throne. That's all I have to say. As your royal uncle, I have a gift for you. Speaking of this, the humble prince took out a list. On this list are the young talents I specially selected for you. Every one of them is very useful. Some of them may be inexperienced, but as long as you are willing to train them well, they will definitely be a great help to you in the future. The soul doppelganger opened the list. The first name on the list was Lu Xingji. He wasn't familiar with most of the names on the list. However, the winners of the elite club, such as Delta Origi, Di Chuan, Zhuge Puha, and Wu Diao, were all on the list. The soul doppelganger wanted to test him. He asked, "Royal Uncle, this Lu Xingji is ranked first. I don't have much contact with him, but I can tell that he is an ambitious man. Can we really put someone like him in an important position?" The humble prince pointed at the list and said, "Haoyan, people like Lu Xingji who are easily seen through by others are not that scary." The scary ones are those who look like they have no desires, but are actually ambitious. You can use Lu Xingji as you wish. If he wants power, you can give him power. If he wants resources, you can give him resources. The only thing you can do is to never let him get involved in the royal family. His talent can only be described as monstrous. In the future, he will probably reach the sky origin stage and become a great minister. As for him, you don't have to restrict his power. When you feel that you can't control him anymore, you can give him a piece of land. You can even make him a king, as long as you can keep him away from the royal capital, which is the center of power. Hearing this, the soul doppelganger sneered in his mind. It turned out that the humble prince thought so highly of him. The humble prince had already prepared a way to control him. However, now that he knew about this, he could make use of this information to do something. Now that everything is clear, you can go back now. Prepare for the ascension ceremony the day after tomorrow. The humble prince waved his hand. The soul doppelganger bowed and returned to the crown prince's palace. The ascension ceremony was not a small matter. As the crown prince, he had to prepare a lot of things and ceremonies. Soon, it was the third day. It was a day that would be recorded in the history books of the Thunderflame dynasty. The ascension of the new emperor. The royal palace was especially grand and solemn that day. Aside from the royal capital, there were also high platforms set up in all the states. All the high-ranking officials gathered there to pay their respects to the emperor. Leng Shiqi, as one of the 4 chief managers of the Dark Thunder Guards, naturally came to the royal palace to participate in his own ascension ceremony. The auspicious time had arrived. Leng Shiqi's soul doppelganger walked to the main hall step by step in the majestic music. Finally, he turned around and sat on the dragon throne. At this moment, he announced to the world that the new emperor of the Thunderflame dynasty was born. Long live His Majesty! Chapter 739. After the coronation ceremony, Lei Haoyan and the courtiers began the court meeting. Now that the shoddy prince had gone into seclusion at the Dragon Vein, the ones standing at the front were not Prime Minister Mo Linhui, but 2 white-haired old men with serious faces. These 2 were relatives of the Thunderfire dynasty's royal family, and they were here to assist the new emperor. Although they were called assistants, they were only a part of it. After all, the new emperor needed advice on how to deal with the country's affairs. However, it was more of an observation to see if Lei Haoyan was suitable to be emperor, and they would make an evaluation of him. Then, the royal family would decide if Lei Haoyan could be a puppet emperor or truly hold power himself. These 2 white-haired old men could be considered Lei Haoyan's grandfather, and they were Lei Duanyi and Lei Duanhai. They were standing straight and staring at the person on the dragon throne. Leng Shiqi's soul clone knew that as long as he didn't make any big mistakes in the next 2 to 3 years, there would be no problem. Moreover, if he could make some wise decisions, he might be able to take control of all the imperial power in advance. Now, the first thing the new emperor did after ascending the throne was to confer titles and appointments. Some of the courtiers present would be demoted to idle positions, some would retire and return to their hometowns, and some would be promoted. As for what the outcome would be, it would be up to the emperor to decide. This was also why eunuch Gao had spent so much effort to nurture his own forces. Only when his wings were strong enough could he show his value and keep his position as one of the 4 great chiefs. After Leng Shiqi became one of the 4 great chiefs, eunuch Gao knew the result. He would definitely continue to hold on to this position. Although it was possible for the 4 great chiefs to form cliques for personal gain, it showed that eunuch Gao had sharp eyes and had contributed greatly to the Thunderfire dynasty's talents. In particular, Leng Shiqi had been put in an important position by the shoddy prince. Just this point alone was enough to stabilize eunuch Gao's position. Afterward, Lei Haoyan took out an imperial edict, and the old eunuch beside him immediately took it and walked to the front of the stage, reading out the names and positions one after another. Immediately, some people in the main hall were happy, while others were sad. But in the end, they all had to kneel down to accept the decree and express their gratitude. Among them, Delta Origi was also appointed as the deputy executor of the discipline department. Her cultivation was now at the middle stage of Gang's spirit realm, which was a whole realm lower than Ling Shiqi, but her cultivation speed was also amazing. Not long ago, she had completed an extremely dangerous mission and gained a lot of merits. Thus, she caught the attention of the king of poor governance. In addition, Wu Diao, Di Chuan, and Zhuge Puha were all promoted. Moreover, most of the people who were promoted this time were young people. They were to build their own team for the new emperor. At the end of the imperial edict, Ling Shiqi was also appointed as an imperial guard. For his current identity as one of the 4 great chiefs, being an imperial guard with a blade was nothing. However, the key point of this position was not power, but trust. The emperor's trust in him. To a certain extent, this was more important than any reward. Many ministers looked at Ling Shiqi with envy. They could imagine that Ling Shiqi was about to become the favorite of the new emperor, and there were so many benefits. The last appointment was temporarily added by Ling Shiqi's soul doppelganger. As long as he became an imperial guard with a blade, he would be qualified to meet the emperor often without arousing suspicion. Ling Shiqi and his soul doppelganger were telepathic, so there was no need for them to discuss any secrets. However, in this way, it would create an illusion that Ling Shiqi was a favored minister. In the future, no matter what the emperor's soul doppelganger rewarded him, it would not be surprising. The 2 royal relatives, Lei Duanyi and Lei Duanhai, looked at each other. The list on the imperial edict was originally prepared by the king of poor governance, but there was no last item. At this time, the soul doppelganger transmitted a sound to them, elders. Before the emperor left, he specially told me that Lu Xingji could be put in an important position. The emperor has already given Lu Xingji the power of acting commander of the Dark Thunder Guards. I can't think of any other reward right now, so giving him a blade guard is just right. Hearing this explanation, Lei Duanyi and Lei Duanhai nodded their heads. This way, not only did they give a reward, they also showed the emperor's love for talent. Furthermore, they did not give Ling Shiqi any real power. It could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Your Majesty, it's rare for you to be so thorough. Lei Duanyi also transmitted a sound, his voice filled with satisfaction. After announcing all the appointments, the most urgent and serious matter for the Thunderflame dynasty was how to deal with the spirit cultivator sects. A month ago, 6 Directions Spirit Sovereign and many other experts from the top sects barged into the palace and almost razed it to the ground, causing the Thunderflame dynasty to suffer a great loss. Although they retreated in the end, it was still like a sword hanging over the head of the Thunderflame dynasty. After that, the Thunderflame dynasty also made some moves, such as improving the Thunderflame Heaven Punishing Array. The various Discipline Division and Dark Thunder Guards were all keeping an eye on the various sects, and even some of the combat troops guarding the surrounding borders were mobilized. Even so, the upper echelons of the Thunderflame dynasty were still worried. How could they guard against thieves every night? Rather than blindly defending, they might as well think of other ways. Mo Linhui walked forward and cupped his hands. Your Majesty, this old subject thinks that how to deal with the spirit cultivator sects, especially those top sects, is the most important matter for the Thunderflame dynasty. I hope that your Majesty can make a decision. Lei Duanyi and Lei Duanhai both looked at Lei Haoyan on the dragon throne. He had just ascended the throne and had already encountered such a troublesome matter. They also wanted to see how he would deal with it. Lei Haoyan muttered to himself for a moment and said, that day, when the various top sects attacked the palace, I was not there, so I would like to hear your opinion first. A general opened his mouth and said, reporting to your Majesty, it is impossible for those top sects to always unite. Moreover, there is already enmity between them. This general believes that while they are unable to react, the dynasty will destroy a few top sects with lightning speed like last time. Let them know the consequences of offending the Thunderflame dynasty. Otherwise, do you know that the people who came last time were only the tip of the iceberg of the top sects? Someone immediately refuted him. Even if the dynasty destroys a few more top sects, the remaining Sky Origin stage experts will still be several times more than the dynasty. Furthermore, doing so will only expand the conflict between the two sides to the point where they will not rest until one side is dead. This subject thinks that we should first befriend a few of the top sections. As long as we destroy their alliance, they will become a pile of loose sand and no longer be a threat. Let the dynasty lower their voices and curry favor with them? Impossible. The courtiers immediately began to speak one after another. They were mainly divided into two sides, the main ones being in favor of war and the main ones being in favor of peace. None of them could convince the other, and none of them could come up with a method that satisfied everyone. When the courtiers did not have a good idea, Ling Shiqi stood out. Your Majesty, this subject has a suggestion. Chapter 740. Minister Lu, please speak. The sole doppelganger gestured, and the others immediately quieted down. Ling Shiqi took 2 steps forward and cupped his fists. Your Majesty is farsighted. A year ago, you predicted that the spirit cultivator sects would counterattack. The truth is indeed so. This humble subject admires you. That's right. The sole doppelganger nodded. I have already said that it is impossible to maintain a strong attitude towards the spirit cultivator sects. However, what you said just now is also true. My dignified Thunder Flame dynasty cannot bend down to curry favor with them. Therefore, this subject has a plan for your Majesty. I am listening. Ling Shiqi and the sole doppelganger sang a double act. Ling Shiqi extended his index finger and made a 1 gesture. He said in a clear voice, the world's first spirit cultivator conference. With these words, the ministers were all confused. It sounded like he wanted to hold a grand event, but with the title of world's first, it was too big. Everyone looked at Ling Shiqi, waiting for his explanation. I would like to ask everyone, why are the top sects called top sects? Ling Shiqi did not explain. Instead, he asked a question. However, there were still people who answered. There are Sky Origin Realm experts in the sect. There are no less than 10 experts in the Unity of Heaven realm. They are qualified to be called top sections. This Lord's words are not accurate enough. We usually think that the sects on the world's ranking are called top sections. Just as this Lord said, in reality, it is not only the powers on the world's ranking that have this qualification. For example, after the 1000 Illusionary Sword sect was destroyed, Pinghui Prefecture's 9 Origin Sword Pavilion fought for the title of 8 Desolate Weapons Path. Ling Shiqi spoke endlessly. As for whether or not the 9 Origin Sword Pavilion can enter the world's ranking, the key lies in one power, and that is Wind Whisper Tower. The world's ranking is set up by Wind Whisper Tower. They use their information network to determine whether or not a sect has the qualifications to enter the world's ranking. For example, the 9 Origin Sword Pavilion and other powers are all fighting to enter the world's ranking and become famous. Do all of you understand what I mean? He spoke for a long time, but did not mention what the so-called world's first spirit cultivator conference was. Instead, he talked about the world's sect ranking. If it were anyone else, they would have been confused, but the people standing here were all extremely astute. They also understood the meaning of Ling Shiqi's words. The Falling Star Continent's world sect ranking list listed more than 50 of the strongest sects and forces. The names of these forces were widely known throughout the world. Even ordinary people were familiar with all the top sects and forces. Therefore, whenever a disciple of a top sect went down the mountain to gain experience, it would attract the envy and surprise of countless people. This was also what the top sects were proud of. At the same time, all the top sects never had to worry about recruiting disciples, because every year, a large number of young geniuses would take the initiative to gather, so they could pick and choose. For example, the 1000 Illusionary Sword sect was already at the bottom of the top sects, but every year, many geniuses would still flock to it. In the end, there was only one word that brought about all of this, and that was fame. Fame and fortune, with fame and fortune, it would naturally bring benefits. Although the officials did not guess the exact method of the world's first spirit cultivator conference, they could still guess that Ling Shiqi wanted to use the name of the Thunderblaze dynasty to bring great fame to the spirit cultivator sects and spirit cultivators. As the saying goes, one's mouth is soft after eating someone's food. After the spirit cultivator sects received the benefits brought by the Thunderblaze dynasty, they were naturally unwilling to become enemies with the Thunderblaze dynasty. Only then did Leng Shiqi explain, "Your Majesty, this subject proposes to use the name of the Thunderblaze dynasty to send out invitations and invite all the spirit cultivators in the world to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator conference. From the pure spirit realm to the sky origin realm, everyone can participate regardless of status. All the participants are divided into 4 categories. The pure spirit realm and the spirit transformation realm are divided into 1 category, which is mainly targeted at those young geniuses. The spirit pulse realm and the spirit aperture realm are grouped together, the spirit astral realm and the unity of heaven realm are grouped together, and finally, the sky origin realm is grouped together. At the beginning of the Spirit Cultivator Conference, the selections will be held in each province. Only the top 10 spirit cultivators of each province will have the qualifications to come to the imperial capital. After layers of battles, the number of winners will be determined according to the different categories, and the rankings will be carried out, which is to imitate the world's ranking of sects and set up a ranking. This subject has initially named it the Dragon Ranking, and has drawn up 4 rankings: the Hidden Dragon Ranking, the Wandering Dragon Ranking, the Flying Dragon Ranking, and the Divine Dragon Ranking. The Hidden Dragon Ranking has a total of 108 positions, and only records the 4 realms of Heaven Realm and the young spirit cultivators under the age of 25. The Wandering Dragon Ranking has 72 positions, and they are basically all the best in the Spirit Aperture Realm. The Flying Dragon Ranking only has 36 people, and these are all great experts of the unity of Heaven Realm. As for the Divine Dragon Ranking, there are only 12 people, and those who can be listed on this ranking are naturally experts of the Sky Origin Realm. Furthermore, the Dark Thunder Guards will use their powerful intelligence network to announce all the names of the Dragon Ranking to the world in a timely manner. Even if it is a small town or a remote village, it will be announced. If nothing unexpected happens, most of the people on the ranking are disciples of the top sections. As a result, they will immediately become famous. As long as there is a name, there will be more benefits. In this way, those top sects will receive the grace of the Thunderfire dynasty. This subject cannot guarantee that all the top sects will be grateful, but at the very least, more than half of the top sects will not give up this opportunity to become famous, and will definitely repair their relationship with the Thunderfire dynasty. After Leng Shiqi finished speaking, the hall fell into silence. So this was the first Spirit Cultivator Conference. After a long while, Minister Mo Linhui clapped his hands and praised, "Wonderful, wonderful." The first Spirit Cultivator Conference will not only greatly ease the relationship between the Imperial Dynasty and the Spirit Cultivator sects, it will also push the reputation of the Imperial Dynasty to an extremely high point. In addition, during the process of the Spirit Cultivator Conference, it will also bring about huge business opportunities for the various provinces and the Imperial capital. Furthermore, we can use this opportunity to find out a large amount of information about the Spirit Cultivator sects. The benefits are beyond imagination. Hearing Lord Lu's words, this old man is enlightened. This old man admires you greatly. The others immediately agreed. The first Spirit Cultivator Conference proposed by Leng Shiqi could be said to be a brilliant plan within a brilliant plan. Even the 2 imperial family elders nodded their heads repeatedly. The soul clone on the dragon throne also praised, but in the end, he changed the topic and said, "Let's do as you say, but we have to add one more thing. After the first Spirit Cultivator Conference ends, the rankings of the various dragon rankings will also be changed. As long as someone can openly challenge someone with a higher ranking, they can replace them. Every month, the dragon rankings will change. What do you think?" Chapter 741. All the officials were moved. If the position of the dragon rankings was still being challenged and changed, then the matter would be even more serious. Especially those young geniuses on the hidden dragon rankings. As long as they cultivated some kind of powerful spiritual skill or possessed an even more powerful spiritual skill, their strength would greatly increase. No one was willing to let their ranking drop, and they would think of ways to increase their strength. This was the attraction and magic of the rankings. This way, the conflicts between the spirit cultivator sects would also be aroused and expanded. At that time, they would not even be able to deal with their own internal strife, let alone have the time to deal with the Thunderfire Imperial dynasty. Mo Linhui immediately shouted, "Your Majesty is wise. Your Majesty is wise." All the officials shouted together. Lei Haoyan, on the dragon throne, chuckled, "Not only that, other than the dragon rankings, I also plan to set up a Phoenix Dance rankings. This ranking is not as complicated as the dragon rankings. There are only 108 places, and all of them are the most beautiful women in the world. Among them, the number one is naturally the number one beauty in the world." As soon as this idea was mentioned, the officials immediately exclaimed that it was wonderful. In this world, the things that could easily make people lose themselves were none other than money, power, and lust. As the saying goes, heroes have a weakness for beauties, and beauties are the tomb of heroes. Since ancient times, how many heroes have fallen under the pomegranate skirt of beauties? By setting up the Phoenix Dance rankings and letting the peerless beauties be known by everyone, then the conflicts surrounding these beauties would naturally appear. Furthermore, the Phoenix Dance rankings itself was a bloodless battle. One had to know that sometimes, a battle between women was even more terrifying than a battle between real swords and spears. When the Phoenix Dance rankings appeared, it would definitely cause an endless storm. At this moment, everyone looked at Lei Haoyan in a different light. This new emperor was much more shrewd than they had imagined. The most troublesome matter in front of them had been resolved in a few words, and he had even proposed a few methods to obtain it in one fell swoop. All of them could be said to be excellent, and in a short period of time, they were completely convinced by Lei Haoyan. The two imperial family relatives felt that Lei Haoyan was no longer the same as before. The impetuosity and impulsiveness of the past had disappeared. It turned out that his thoughts were actually so meticulous. He knew all the sects in the world like the back of his hand, and was even well aware of their weaknesses. It was obvious that he had studied the spirit cultivator sects for a long time. It seems that this emperor has chosen the right person, the two elders thought. "What do you think about the dragon ranking and Phoenix Dance ranking?" the soul clone asked. At this moment, Lei Duan-Yi raised a question. "There's nothing else. What I'm most worried about is that there will be a large number of experts entering the Imperial City in the near future. That means those Sky Origin stage cultivators who want to harm the Imperial Court can come in openly. Their existence is such a threat to the Imperial Court." The soul doppelganger smiled and said, "Elder, you're worrying too much. I'm sure they won't cause trouble in the Imperial City, and they wouldn't dare." The Imperial Court and the top sects had just had an intense conflict, and in the blink of an eye, they had invited spirit cultivators to enter the Imperial capital. What would the spirit cultivator sect think? They would think it was a trap. Therefore, the sects that are hostile to the dynasty don't dare to come to Imperial capital. Lei Duan-Yi nodded thoughtfully and said, "Your Majesty is farsighted." All the ministers immediately knelt down. "Your Majesty is wise." The world's first spirit cultivator assembly was proposed by Minister Liu. We merely modified it slightly. Since this was Minister Liu's idea, you will have full authority to handle this matter. If you need anyone in the process, you can mobilize them at will. The Imperial Edict will be issued soon. This subject receives the edict. With regards to the method of dealing with the spirit cultivator sects, there were still a few matters that were neither big nor small to be discussed. After the court meeting ended, Ling Shiqi began to prepare for the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. This matter would involve the mobilization of all 36 provinces and the imperial capital of the Thunderblaze dynasty. There were simply too many things that needed to be prepared. Even though Ling Shiqi already had plans, it still took him a few days to finalize everything. Following which, the Thunderblaze dynasty announced to the world that they would be holding the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. They also released the news of the establishment of the Dragon ranking and the Phoenix Dance ranking. As for the time, the first round of selections for the various provinces and counties was scheduled for 2 months later, and the second round of the imperial capital battle was scheduled for half a year later. Immediately, the entire Falling Star continent was shaken. Especially within the Thunderblaze dynasty, the streets and alleys were filled with intense discussions about the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. Countless people saw a good opportunity to quickly become famous, and there were also people who saw through the scheme behind this. However, even if they knew the intentions of the Thunderblaze dynasty, they still couldn't help but want to participate. It could be said that this was an open conspiracy. I want to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. I will definitely be on the hidden dragon ranking. A youth in the marketplace raised his head and said, "Don't joke around, you. You couldn't even enter a second-rate sect last year, and you want to be on the hidden dragon ranking? I think you won't even be able to pass the first round." In a restaurant next to a few youths. "Brother Wang, you and I have been rogue cultivators for more than 20 years. It wasn't easy for us to cultivate to the spirit aperture realm, but we are still looked down upon by those spirit cultivator sections. The world's first spirit cultivator assembly doesn't care about one's background, it only looks at one's strength. We can give it a try. Once we are on the wandering dragon ranking, we will be famous throughout the world. Even if we establish a sect, there will be a large number of disciples following us." "That's right, I have the same intention." The upper echelons of the Tang family, a first-rate sect in Donglin County, gathered together. "The world's first spirit cultivator assembly is a good opportunity for my Tang family to become famous. In 3 days, there will be a small competition within the family. All the winners will be able to participate. Patriarch, Tang Wanxiu's cultivation has improved very quickly, and her strength is not bad. She might be able to compete for the qualifications to be on the Wandering Dragon ranking. However, she has always been at the back of the mountain and doesn't want to communicate with others. What should we do?" It's related to the Tang family's reputation. She can't be willful." The meeting hall of the top sect, the Supreme Saber Hall, was not calm either. "Hall Master, forgive me for being blunt, but you can't go." "That's right, Hall Master. The sect needs you to personally oversee it." The Hall Master of the Supreme Saber Hall, Fu Yingxi, was full of fighting spirit. "You don't have to say any more. I have already decided to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. My name will definitely be on the Divine Dragon ranking." Seeing him like this, the elders and genius disciples couldn't persuade him anymore. Actually, as the leader of a top sect, he couldn't leave the sect as he pleased, let alone participate in the spirit cultivator assembly of the Thunderblaze dynasty. Don't forget, the Supreme Saber Hall was also among those who attacked the imperial capital a month ago. They were afraid that this was a trap. If something happened to Fu Yingxi, it would be a huge blow to the Supreme Saber Hall. Yushu, who was in the crowd, rolled his eyes and then smiled strangely. At this time, in the Extraordinary Force 6 Directions Spiritual Region, 6 Directions Spiritual Sovereign frowned. He carefully looked at the information about the world's first spirit cultivator assembly in his hand. After a long time, he sighed faintly and said, "Good move, a good move." Chapter 742. The preparations for the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference were in full swing. The core cities of the various states and counties were packed with people, and the Thunderblaze dynasty was unprecedentedly lively. On this day, a handsome young man walked into Donglin town. He was dressed in a black robe and carried a long sword on his back. He looked quite dashing. He went straight to the entrance of the city lord's mansion. This was also the place to register for the world's first Spirit Cultivator Assembly. It had already been more than a month since the registration began, but there was still a long queue. Although the city lord's mansion had already sent out a large number of people, and there were more than 10 places where one could register, there were simply too many people. This was especially true for youths below the 4 realms of celestial being. There were simply too many to count. The black-clothed youth consciously stood at the back of the group. There were at least 200 people in front of his group. Fortunately, it wasn't too troublesome to register. He estimated that it would be his turn in about 2 hours. The popularity of the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference is truly unexpected, he muttered. That's right. Someone had appeared behind the black-clothed young man at some point in time. Naturally, he continued the conversation. The black-clothed youth turned around and saw a middle-aged man with a wooden skewer hanging from the corner of his mouth. This person's face was black and his teeth were yellow. When he opened his mouth, one could smell the stench of his breath. However, the black-clothed youth didn't mind. He seemed to be bored and started chatting. "Uncle, are you here to sign up as well?" "Uncle? Do I look that old?" "I'm only a few years older than you," the black-faced man said with a face full of dissatisfaction. As he spoke, he even wiped his face, as if trying to make it look whiter. The black-clothed youth immediately smiled and said, "I was rude. Please don't blame me, big brother. That's more like it. My name is Suji. It feels good to be called big brother. I'm definitely going to befriend you." Suji waved his hand with a heroic look. "So it's big brother Su, I am." The young man in black paused for a moment before saying his name. "I am Leng Shichi." That's right, this black-clothed youth was Leng Shichi. After he had arranged everything for the world's first spirit cultivator conference, there was nothing for him to do for the time being. At the very least, he would be fine until the second round of the imperial capital. Even if there was an accident, there would be someone to take care of it. Ever since he had broken through to the one with the world realm, the teleportation range of his fate's skill had expanded to 5,000 miles. Coupled with the Goo King's wings, he could travel 7,000 to 8,000 miles in a day at full speed. Of course, Leng Shichi was not out for sightseeing. He visited all the 9 prefectures as fast as he could, and Donglin County was his last destination. He had 3 purposes for doing this. First of all, he was traveling incognito. He did not reveal his identity when he traveled through the 9 provinces. Instead, he was secretly observing the behavior of the Dark Thunder Guards. Secondly, he wanted to greet the Blood Garment Pavilion branches in the 9 prefectures so that they could also participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. Moreover, he also discussed with them the order of changing the Blood Garment Pavilion's mission rules, as well as what they should pay attention to. This matter was requested by the Ink Frost Ghoul, and Leng Shichi also agreed to it. However, he really did not wish for a big mess to happen within his jurisdiction. As for the third reason, he also wanted to participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. Leng Shichi, as the initiator, could not participate in this matter in principle, but it did not mean that he could not use other identities. Donglin County was the last stop of his trip, and also the first prefecture he had come to after leaving Blood Fog Island. He decided to register in Donglin County. The reason why he did not casually use a fake name, but used his real name in this life, was that he felt that there was no need to be timid. In this world, there were very few people who knew that he was Leng Shichi. At most, some people in the Blood Garment Pavilion branch in Donglin County had heard of this name. In addition, the Tang family, a first-class force in Donglin County, should also remember this name. After all, Leng Shichi had killed the genius of the Tang family, Tang Hapu, and was secretly wanted for a period of time. At the mention of the Tang family, killing intent flashed in Leng Shichi's heart. Since he had come to Donglin County, he did not mind ending this feud and eliminating a hidden danger. Leng Shichi. Suji repeated it twice. This name is a bit strange. Are you the 17th in your family? Brother Su, you guessed it. In fact, I am an orphan. I was adopted by the master when I was young. I am the master's 17th disciple, so I got the name, Leng Shichi replied. Suji touched his head and said bitterly, "Don't blame me for mentioning your sad story." Leng Shichi waved his hand. "It doesn't matter. Brother Su, you don't have to take it to heart. I see that your cultivation is profound. I wonder which sect you are from." Suji raised his head slightly and said with some pride, "Brother, you can see that my cultivation is profound. You have a good eye. As for the sect, to tell you the truth, there is no sect in the world that can catch my eye." Hearing this, Leng Shichi did not know what to say. He could see at a glance that Suji's cultivation was only in the spiritual pulse realm. and the spiritual energy in his body was very mixed. He could basically tell that he broke through by force. It was already good enough for someone like him to become a deacon elder in a third-rate sect. He was clearly a wandering cultivator with no future, yet he was still showing off. But Leng Shiqi couldn't care less. He was just casually talking to pass the time. Brother Su, you have a heart of mountains and seas. I admire you. You're too kind. By the way, who is your master? Leng Shiqi hesitated and said, I can't casually reveal my master, but I feel like old friends with Brother Su at first sight. I can't bear to lie to you. My master is the Wave Island Sword Monarch. Su Ji was stunned. Not because of anything else, but because he had never heard of this Wave Island Sword Monarch. However, seeing Leng Shiqi's cherished look in the title of Sword Monarch, Su Ji guessed that Leng Shiqi must have an extraordinary background. He cupped his hands and said, Brother, you are the disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch? I am so envious. Leng Shiqi laughed in his mind. He didn't just randomly make up the title, Wave Island Sword Monarch. He used it to cover his own identity. The Wave Island Sword Monarch was actually a powerful wandering cultivator from overseas. He was in the Sky Origin stage. It was said that he once sat alone on an isolated island for dozens of years to learn a trace of sword intent. In the end, he reached the Sky Origin stage. On that day, sword will soared into the sky, and waves surged into the sky, directly engulfing that island. That was why he was called the Wave Island Sword Monarch. The Wave Island Sword Monarch had always been a mystery. In fact, according to the Dark Thunder Guards, he had died in a dangerous place. It was just that outsiders didn't know about it. Moreover, the Dark Thunder Guards also collected his corpse and even accidentally obtained a part of his inherited cultivation method. Unfortunately, it was only broken. When Leng Shiqi found out about this, he secretly cultivated the incomplete technique left behind by the Wave Island Sword Monarch and disguised himself as his disciple. The Wave Island Sword Monarch was a spirit cultivator from overseas and had disappeared for dozens of years. As long as the Wave Island Sword Monarch's close relatives didn't appear, Leng Shiqi was confident that no one would be able to see through his disguise. Time passed as Leng Shiqi and Su Ji talked back and forth. When it was Su Ji's turn, the person on duty handed him a pen and said, Write down your name, origin, cultivation, and who your master is. He waved the pen and wrote down his name, Leng Shiqi. Chapter 743. After writing down his name, Leng Shiqi then wrote down his cultivation, oneness of heaven and man. He did not plan to hide his cultivation, because he was aiming for the Flying Dragon list's rankings. Moreover, he also wanted to see how much strength he could show in his other identities other than those abilities that everyone was already familiar with. In addition, he had another ulterior motive. When the person in charge of registration saw the words, oneness of heaven and man, his hands suddenly trembled. His eyes widened and he quickly stood up. He thought it was an expert from some sect and wanted to flatter him. However, after he saw that Leng Shiqi was just a young man, his expression instantly became gloomy. Where did this brat come from? How dare he write nonsense about his cultivation? What nonsense? You're affecting other people's time. Believe it or not, I can ban you from registering right now. His loud noise immediately attracted the attention of many people. After all, waiting in line was a boring thing. A little excitement quickly attracted everyone's attention. Su Ji, who was standing behind Leng Shiqi, stretched his head out to take a look, and laughed. I say, brother, your cultivation realm is too ridiculous. I think you're already a genius if you can reach the spiritual pulse realm at your age. The oneness of heaven and man is too exaggerated. He thought Leng Shiqi was joking. Forget it. Since you're young and ignorant, quickly change it so as not to delay other people's time, the person who registered said impatiently. Leng Shiqi didn't speak. He stroked the long sword on his back. In an instant, a shocking sword cry resounded through the sky. The soaring sword intent stirred up the wind and clouds. All the spirit cultivators in front of the city lord's mansion painfully covered their ears. Even the entire Donglin city was affected. Several figures immediately rushed out of the city lord's mansion. They were all great masters of the oneness of heaven and man realm. Among them was City Lord Fengluan, whom Ling Shiqi had met when he came to participate in the elite meeting. Fengluan focused and said, "Who's the master here? Making a move in the city is too disrespectful to the city lord's mansion." At this moment, everyone's gaze turned towards Ling Shiqi. The few Unity of Heaven realms were extremely surprised when they saw how young Ling Shiqi was. Looking at Ling Shiqi's appearance, he seemed to be in his 20s. How could he reach the unity of heaven and man realm at such a young age? Even the strongest genius disciple of the four saint spiritual realms couldn't do this. However, the shocking sword intent on Ling Shiqi's body showed that he was in the unity of heaven and man realm. This could not be faked. It could be seen that the background of this black-clothed youth was definitely not simple. Ling Shiqi's eyes flashed. He suddenly remembered that when he was in the spiritual pulse realm and the spirit aperture realm, his cultivation progress was also very fast. The reason was that the spiritual pulse and the spirit aperture in his body had been opened long ago. And the person who opened these spiritual pulse and the spirit aperture was Meng Tianzong. The most powerful man 10,000 years ago, the ruthless man who sacrificed all the disciples of his sect in order to break through to the next realm. Ling Shiqi remembered that there used to be a phantom of Meng Tianzong in the spiritual space, but after he broke through to the spirit aperture realm, it disappeared inexplicably. Gradually, he forgot about this matter. Now that he saw Tang Wanxiu and thought of Oziu, a possibility suddenly appeared in his mind. That was whether the people who came out of the phantom spirit's secret realm alive in the end would all make rapid progress like them. If so, it meant that they had all been tampered with by Meng Tianzong. It was absolutely impossible for that crazy and ruthless person to bestow an opportunity to others for no reason. Perhaps he had other intentions. This made Ling Shiqi feel a little worried. At this time, when Tang Wanxiu heard the last sentence just now, her footsteps suddenly stopped, and then she smiled sadly. Since she was born, her fate had been led by the Tang family, and she had never had the slightest freedom. In the eyes of the Tang family, she, a girl born of a concubine, was at most a tool. In the past, in order to have a genius disciple in the spiritual pulse realm to act as a shield, the Tang family forced her to break through, which almost cut off her future of cultivation. Fortunately, she was not without a bit of luck. Since coming out of the phantom spirit's secret realm, she found that her cultivation was extremely fast, and even there were no bottlenecks between the small realms. Very quickly, she cultivated to the spirit aperture realm, but the Tang family still did not value her, and was even chased to the back of the mountain. It was not for anything else, but because she covered up the glory of the direct descendants. In the cultivation family, the concept was very important. Men were superior to women, and the difference between the direct descendants and the concubines was so strict. Now that the world's first spirit cultivator assembly had appeared, the Tang family thought that this was a good opportunity. Thinking of her as a concubine's daughter, they forced her to participate. However, Tang Wanxiu was very stubborn. Just now, when everyone was alarmed by Ling Shiqi's sword intent, she tried to escape, but she could not let go of her loved ones. In the end, she seemed to have accepted her fate and obediently walked back to the registration place. The people chasing her all sneered, mocking her one after another. Her face was ashen, as if she did not hear anything. Seeing this, Ling Shiqi was deep in thought, and he already had a plan in his heart. Chapter 744. This farce was nothing to Fengluan and the other higher-ups. Fengluan continued to invite Ling Shiqi into the city lord's mansion. It was only then that Su Ji, who was behind Ling Shiqi, recovered from his shock. He stammered, "Be brother, oh no, senior, why you're in the unity of heaven and man realm. The realm is nothing. I also want to thank brother Su for accompanying me for so long." Ling Shiqi said politely. He patted Su Ji's shoulder lightly, and then an extremely pure aura surged into Su Ji's body. In the blink of an eye, all of his spirit veins were cleansed. Su Ji's originally heterogeneous spirit energy was completely refreshed, making him feel so comfortable that he couldn't help but close his eyes. This also meant that the hidden dangers in his cultivation had been removed, and his future cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort. By the time Su Ji opened his eyes, Leng Shiqi had already entered the city lord residence. Leng Shiqi had a strange expression as he said, "I'm actually addressing a great expert at the union of heaven and man realm as brothers. I'm afraid I'm not dreaming, right?" When Leng Shiqi walked in, there were already more than 20 people sitting in the city lord's mansion. At a glance, these people were all in the unity of heaven and man realm. Such a lineup would be shocking outside, but in Leng Shiqi's eyes, it was nothing. After all, he had far more experts in the unity of heaven and man realm under his command. He looked around and found that 1/3 of the people in this group were wearing yellow and blue clothes. Upon closer inspection, there were 8 people. These 8 people were all from the top sect, the Mountain Sea sect. There were also 3 or 4 people from the Wu and Tang families, and one of them was an old acquaintance of Leng Shiqi. This person's name was Tang Haoqing, the Tang Haoqing who almost killed Leng Shiqi a few years ago in front of the Blood Cloak Pavilion branch. At that time, Tang Haoqing was still in the spirit astral realm, but now he had broken through to the unity of heaven and man realm. However, he was only in the early stage, and was at the bottom of the crowd. For him to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly with such a cultivation, it must be out of helplessness. This also meant that the Tang family was indeed declining. When Leng Shiqi saw Tang Haoqing, a murderous intent flashed in his heart. This was the so-called enemies meet on a narrow road. In addition to these 3 forces, there were also a few rogue cultivators. As for the rest, they were experts from the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. As direct subordinates of the Thunderblaze dynasty, the experts of the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards were naturally qualified to participate in the first Spirit Cultivator Conference. However, in order to avoid arousing suspicion, the people from the City Lord's mansion were not allowed to participate. When the experts in the room saw Leng Shiqi come in, they were all shocked because Leng Shiqi was too young. In fact, the current Leng Shiqi was his original appearance. He was not disguised, and he was only 20 years old. Of course, as long as it was a spirit cultivator of the 4 realms of heaven, they could not judge their age purely from their appearance. At first, they thought that Leng Shiqi had specially cultivated a technique to preserve his appearance. However, one of the experts with green eyes said in surprise, "Your bone age is only around 20 years old, how is that possible?" With these words, the experts went from surprise to shock. There were even a few people who stood up and stared at Leng Shiqi with burning eyes. Even Feng Luan, who came in with Leng Shiqi, was the same. He was stunned for a moment before saying, "Little friend Leng is actually so young. The younger generation will surpass us in time, the younger generation will surpass us in time." The expert of the Shiju Wu turned his head and asked, "Old Qing, are you sure?" Old Qing said disdainfully, "This old man's divine eyes of azure glass can see through everything. If I can't even see through a mere bone age, I'll just slit my own throat." The others were silent. Although Old Qing's words were a bit exaggerated, his divine eyes of azure glass was indeed mysterious. It was not a problem to see through bone age. If that was the case, then Leng Shiqi's identity was worth guessing. Generally speaking, it was already very rare for a top sect to break through to the spirit pulse realm in their early 20s. Leng Shiqi was good. He directly jumped 3 realms and was on the same level as them. What kind of terrifying cultivation talent was this? Not only was it cultivation talent, but everyone present had also experienced the process of breaking through to the spirit crystal realm. They knew that the most important thing in breaking through to the unity of heaven and man realm was comprehension. This also meant that the young man standing in front of them, whether it was cultivation talent or comprehension, was extremely high. One had to know that most of the people present were in their 70s or 80s. Even Old Qing was over 100 years old. Compared to him, they felt ashamed of their inferiority. They were all humans, but why was there such a big difference? Moreover, they were certain that even the four sacred spirit realm could not have such a monstrous genius. Therefore, these two words appeared in their minds. The yin and yang halls. Could this young man be a disciple of the mysterious yin and yang halls? Leng Shiqi was the first to salute. I am Leng Shiqi, a rogue cultivator from outside the sea. Greetings, everyone. A rogue cultivator from outside the sea? Hearing this, everyone was in disbelief. There were many spirit cultivator factions outside the sea, but the only ones that could truly be brought out were the one or two top factions from Falling Jade Island. It was impossible for such a monstrous genius to appear. This was nothing more than an excuse. However, it was not good for them to delve deeper. An imposing expert from the Mountain Sea sect stood up and said, "So it's an expert from outside the sea." Mountain Sea sect's Chung Feng Yu greets you. The others also began to exchange pleasantries. They all thought that Leng Shiqi's background was extraordinary, and there were only benefits and no disadvantages to befriending him. Moreover, they might soon become opponents, so it was not bad to take the opportunity to gather some information. Leng Shiqi could not avoid it. This time, his character was set to be kind and humble, so he could not break it. Soon, he gradually blended into the crowd, and at night, he even drank to his heart's content. After that, he lived in the city lord's mansion. Half a month later, the auditions were finally about to begin. On this day, Leng Shiqi and the other Unity of Heaven realm experts gathered again. The only difference was that the atmosphere was not as harmonious as before, because today was the day to announce their opponents for the first round. After half a month, a few more Unity of Heaven realm cultivators had signed up. Now, there were 32 people. In the end, only 10 of them would be able to go to the imperial capital, which meant 22 people would be eliminated. Moreover, these were all famous figures, so losing would be shameful. Thus, whether their opponents in the first round were strong or weak had a lot to do with it. Naturally, there were strong and weak people present. The strongest were undoubtedly Chung Feng Yu and the others from the Mountain Sea sect, as well as the Tang family's patriarch Tang Haoquang and sect master Wu of the 10 Absolutes, Huang Xiuan. These people were basically locked in one of the 10 spots. The weakest was obviously someone like Tang Haoqing, who had just broken through. Anyone who met him could be considered lucky. Feng Luan walked in and flicked his finger. Suddenly, 32 spirit lights of different colors shot out. Everyone is old acquaintances, so the rules of drawing lots are very simple. Those who draw the same color will be their opponents. There are 32 people in total, so we need the second round to determine 8 spots. As for the last 2 spots, they will be determined through the arena battles. The rules were indeed very simple. Everyone stared at the spirit lights in the air. With a thought from Feng Luan, the spirit lights began to rapidly spin without any pattern. After a few breaths, all the spirit lights scattered and landed in front of everyone. Leng Shiqi had a faint yellow spirit light in front of him, and another spirit light of the same color was in front of Tang Haoqing. Chapter 745. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Leng Shiqi thought to himself. He looked at Tang Haoqing and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. At the same time, Tang Haoqing also looked over. When he saw that his opponent was Leng Shiqi, he let out a sigh of relief. It was very difficult to tell the exact level of the unity of heaven and man realm at a glance. After all, the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm was related to the amount of elemental energy one could use. Without fighting, no one could figure out the other's strength. In Tang Haoqing's opinion, since Leng Shiqi had entered the unity of heaven and man realm at such a young age, he must only be at the early stage. They were at the same level, so it was not certain who would win. He thought that he still had a chance. City Lord Feng Luan moved his finger, and the spirit light changed into each person's name, which was listed in pairs. The first round of battle list is here. The battle will begin tomorrow. The venue will be provided by the City Lord's residence. Everyone, prepare well. After he finished speaking, he left. When the experts of the Tang family saw the name Ling Shiqi, they exchanged glances. This name had left a deep impression on them. This was because Ling Shiqi had killed the Tang family's genius, Tang Hepu, a few years ago. Of course, Ling Shiqi was not the only one who had killed their family's genius. Bing Shang had also killed another genius, Tang Heyu. However, the Tang family had a clearer memory of Ling Shiqi. This name was very special. Who would use a number as a name? Moreover, 17 was a number that did not have any meaning. However, Ling Shiqi had never used this name in front of outsiders in the past few years, and the Tang family had long given up on it. They did not expect to see this name again today. These days, everyone had been calling Ling Shiqi young friend Ling. Moreover, the Tang family did not get too close to Ling Shiqi, so they only knew his full name now. The Tang family's patriarch, Tang Haoquang, said, "Do you still remember Ling Shiqi?" Of course, this is the person who killed Tang Hepu. Tang Haoqing was the first to speak. Another elder of the Tang family said, "This mysterious young man is also called Ling Shiqi. Could they be the same person?" No, that Ling Shiqi is a black-clothed assassin from the Blood Garment Pavilion. No matter how talented he is, it is impossible for him to cultivate from the spirit transformation realm to the unity of heaven and man realm in just a few years. That's true. But it's strange that Ling Shiqi has the same name. Hao Qing, this person has a mysterious background. You have to be careful. They all felt that this Ling Shiqi was definitely not the Ling Shiqi they knew. However, they would never have dreamed that the Ling Shiqi had cultivated all the way to the unity of heaven and man realm in just a few short years. On the second day, the world's first spirit cultivator assembly officially began. The competition rules for each cultivation realm were different. There were very few people in the realm of unity of heaven and man. It was a one-on-one competition, but there were too many spirit cultivators below the fourth realm of heaven and man. There were tens of thousands of them. If they were to compete one by one, how long would it take? Therefore, the competition method used by the low-level spirit cultivators was very cruel, but it was also very efficient. This was the inspiration that Ling Shiqi received from the Blood Mist Island. It was to let tens of thousands of low-level spirit cultivators gather in the array and then kill each other regardless of friend or foe. Everyone had a token on them. In a life-and-death situation, as long as they took the initiative to crush the token, they could leave the array at any time. Of course, this also meant that they were eliminated. In the end, only the few people who remained were qualified to enter the competition. When the rules of the competition were announced, all the low-level spirit cultivators were stunned. Tens of thousands of people fighting, just thinking about it made them shudder. Even if they could leave by crushing the token, with so many spirit cultivators in the chaotic battle, it was still unknown whether they would have the chance to crush the token. Therefore, some people directly gave up on the spot. Ling Shiqi and the others did not know about this, because the competition venue of the unity of heaven and man realm was hundreds of miles away from Donglin City. This was a barren mountain, and the surrounding 100 miles were sealed off. They were afraid that the battle between the unity of heaven and man realm would be too terrifying and harm the innocent, so they chose this place. Feng Luan and the other experts of the City Lord Mansion were the judges. "Everyone, we don't have many people, and the competition between the unity of heaven and man realm is very rare. Let's start one by one." The others also tacitly agreed. After all, everyone was in the unity of heaven and man realm, and the fight between each other was indeed worth watching. The first two opponents were a bit special, because these two people were from the top sect, Mountain Sea Sect. This time, the Mountain Sea Sect sent a total of 8 experts, which indeed showed the strength of the Mountain Sea Sect, but also made the possibility of internal strife very high. "Senior brother Lu, the last time you and I fought was at the sect competition more than 20 years ago, right?" "That's right. That time, I was lucky to win. I hope junior brother Feng will do his best this time." The two of them tried peaceful means before resorting to force, and the others were watching them attentively. A green and white light flashed in Ling Shiqi's eyes. These two experts of the Mountain Sea sect had the same cultivation, which was the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Moreover, the cultivation method they practiced was the same, so to determine the winner, it depended on something other than cultivation and cultivation method. For example, spiritual weapons or some secret methods that one obtained through chance. Whoever had the advantage in this aspect had a greater chance of winning. Sure enough, the two of them were completely evenly matched at the beginning, and in the end, senior brother Lu won by relying on a defensive magical item. Junior brother Feng, thank you for letting me win. Senior brother Lu's skill is still better. I admit defeat. Feng Luan stood out and said, Lu Gaoi of the Mountain Sea sect wins. Next, Tang Haoqing of the Tang family will fight against Ling Shiqi, the overseas rogue cultivator. Hearing this, Ling Shiqi lifted his feet and his figure flashed out. He was a little surprised that it was his turn so soon, but it didn't matter. Tang Haoqing of the Tang family fiercely stomped on the ground, and with a loud bang, a pillar of fire shot up into the sky, causing him to fly high into the air. In the end, he crashed to the ground, creating a huge pit in the ground. Tang Haoqing's actions were naturally to show his strength, but in Ling Shiqi's eyes, Tang Haoqing's weakness of not being very proficient in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was exposed. Ling Shiqi pulled out the long sword on his back. It was actually a very ordinary 5th stage spiritual sword. A great expert of the unity of heaven and man realm with a 5th stage spiritual sword? It couldn't be so shabby. Or perhaps, he didn't put Tang Haoqing in his eyes? Tang Haoqing's expression suddenly became gloomy. He waved his fists, and raging flames bathed his body. The fire spiritual energy of heaven and earth became violent, and the temperature within a radius of dozens of miles rose sharply. Tang family, Tang Haoqing. Ling Shiqi lightly pointed his long sword, and his entire body instantly became like a sharp sword piercing through the sky. In his eyes, there was no heaven, no earth, no self, and no other. There was only the sword. Sect leader Wu of the 10 Absolutes, Huang Xiuan, immediately exclaimed, Sword Heart Illumination. Chapter 746. Hearing Huang Xiuan's shout, the rest of the people were shocked. The brilliant sword heart was a transcendent realm that sword cultivators pursued in their lives. It was not some kind of cultivation method or sword skill, but a state of mind that led to the ultimate sword path. This state of mind was extremely difficult to reach. Not to mention others, no one in Donglin County had reached this realm. Only those spirit cultivators who specialized in sword path might have a few. Those who had this state of mind were all sword path experts, and more than 80% of them were sky origin realm experts. Some people also said that spirit cultivators who could have the brilliant sword heart had almost paved the way to the sky origin realm. Everyone present was a great expert in the realm of unity of heaven and man. They were all famous figures in Donglin County, but for those in the realm of unity of heaven and man, their greatest desire was naturally the sky origin realm. Only by reaching the sky origin realm could one truly stand in the forest of the strong and look down on all living things. In this falling star continent, one could walk freely. Therefore, when Huang Xiuan shouted the words, brilliant sword heart, everyone was so surprised. At the same time, there was some envy in their surprise. Ling Shiqi was already in the realm of unity of heaven and man at such a young age. This was already shocking enough. He had also comprehended the brilliant sword heart. In the future, he had a great chance of breaking through to the sky origin realm. At this moment, such a genius was standing in front of them, making everyone feel as if they had cultivated blindly for decades. Especially Chang Fengyu of the Mountain Sea sect, Tang Haoquang, and Huang Xiuan of the Tang family. They were the 3 most promising people to break through to the sky origin realm. Now that they saw Ling Shiqi was abnormally outstanding, their expressions became even more complicated. Moreover, no one questioned because Huang Xiuan, the sect leader of the Shiju sect, had also cultivated sword path. The brilliant sword heart was also the realm he wanted to reach, so it was impossible for him to be wrong. Ling Shiqi had shocked many experts before he even used his sword. In fact, he had obtained the brilliant sword heart a long time ago, but only recently did he know the power of the brilliant sword heart. A few years ago, when he was still on the Blood Mist Island, he had drawn the brilliant sword heart. However, at that time, he didn't feel anything and had long forgotten about it. Until recently, when Leng Shiqi practiced the 1,000 Illusion Sword Codex, he did not use his unlimited skill points, but he realized that his sword skills were progressing very quickly. At first, he thought it was because the 1,000 Illusionary Sword Codex was related to illusions. However, he decided to disguise himself as a disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch and began to cultivate the sword techniques left behind by him. Gradually, Leng Shiqi realized that every time he practiced sword skills, he would enter a mysterious state. It was in this state that he could comprehend sword skills so quickly. At that time, he suddenly remembered the enlightened sword heart. The strange thing was that he vaguely remembered that the brilliant sword heart was only a beginner prize. It shouldn't have such a strong effect. Later on, he thought about it again. Perhaps the brilliant sword heart was also a kind of talent that would only reveal itself when one came into contact with this field. Now that he was the disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch, he had to show off his sword skills. Since the enlightened sword heart had merged with Leng Shiqi, he naturally entered this state when he attacked. At this moment, the expression on Tang Haoqing's face turned ugly. Clearly, he was the one fighting with Leng Shiqi. Now, the fight hadn't even started yet, and Leng Shiqi had stolen all the limelight. However, he could also feel the pressure that Leng Shiqi was exerting on him. Leng Shiqi held his sword and did not make a move, but Tang Haoqing felt as if he was in a forest of swords, as if there were countless swords hidden everywhere. Tang Haoqing did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. His entire body was bathed in flames, and an incomparably thick broadsword appeared in his hand. The raging flames that filled the skies suddenly shrank, gradually turning into a dark red color, making him look a little demonic. Tang Haoquang, the patriarch of the Tang family, frowned. He's going all out. Dark red flames lingered on the huge broadsword. As Tang Haoqing slashed, a scorching and murderous aura suddenly soared into the sky. The broadsword light was tens of thousands of feet long. Leng Shiqi was still chuckling. He turned his long sword, and in an instant, everyone heard the sound of turbulent waves and even smelled a trace of the sea breeze. It was as if they had arrived on the boundless sea in the blink of an eye. The raging flames around Tang Haoqing were instantly suppressed to the extreme, and the sky-tearing broadsword light shrank by half. Leng Shiqi still did not attack, but he easily suppressed Tang Haoqing with his every move. This kind of strength inevitably made others secretly shocked. Huang Xiuan, the leader of the 10 Absolutes, murmured, that can't be sword intent forming a field, right? At this moment, Leng Shiqi finally attacked. With a point of his sword, raging waves surged into the sky, and strange phenomena appeared. There seemed to be an island looming in the raging waves, full of strangeness. Under the suppression of the raging waves, Tang Haoqing's broadsword light was on the verge of collapse. Tang Haoqing knew that things were not good. Immediately, he roared, and the heavenly fire descended and condensed into a broadsword. In an instant, he slashed down and tore the sword river apart. Leng Shiqi's spiritual sword slashed down, and countless sword chi suddenly burst out. The sword chi were violent, soft, majestic, and sinister. The countless sword chi were accompanied by completely different sword styles. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth within 100 miles, regardless of the elemental attributes, became the same type, and that was sword. Not only that, the sword chi everywhere intertwined, densely covering the sky and the sun, with endless killing intent strangling Tang Haoqing. Such a terrifying attack not only gave Tang Haoqing a fright, but even the many experts who were watching the battle were slightly stunned. The number of sword chi did not mean much, and everyone present could do it. However, the sword chi was all-encompassing, which meant that Leng Shiqi had not only comprehended one or a few types of sword intent, but hundreds and thousands of them. Was he still human? Not to mention whether Tang Haoqing could block it, at least half of the experts were not confident that they could block this move. In addition, from the range and extent of Leng Shiqi's spiritual energy of heaven and earth, he was clearly at the intermediate stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Originally, they thought that Leng Shiqi was already a monster for cultivating to the unity of heaven and man realm in his 20s. Now, it looked like he had just broken through, and he was already at the intermediate stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Where did such a freak come from? At the same time, everyone already knew the result of the battle in their hearts. They also felt sorry for Tang Haoqing, who asked him to meet such a monster. Tang Haoqing's heart was also in despair. He had comprehended the fire attribute's spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but under Leng Shiqi's sword domain, he could not display his true strength at all. Facing this monstrous sword chi, he was even more powerless to resist, and could only shout, "I admit defeat." Hearing this, Leng Shiqi also stopped, but he seemed to be half a beat slower. Hundreds of sword chi still tore through Tang Haoqing's protective flame. The sword chi entered his body, instantly causing Tang Haoqing to be bathed in blood. At the same time, his face showed a painful expression, as if he was experiencing the world's torture. In fact, this was indeed the case. Since Leng Shiqi became one of the 4 chiefs, he had received a huge amount of spiritual skill resources, and he had cultivated a lot during his seclusion. He also felt that it was very complicated, so he used it in the form of sword chi. To be honest, even he himself did not know how many kinds of strange sword chi had entered Tang Haoqing's body. He looked at Tang Haoqing's painful appearance and sneered in his heart, but he said with an apologetic expression, "I am not very proficient in spiritual skill, so I did not stop for a moment. Please forgive me." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.